think we're already here. Good to go. All right, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is our study session for the Pro-Housing Designation. Can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Furman.
Present.
Councilmember Holmes.
Present.
Councilmember Miller.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor Ortiz.
Present.
And for the record, Mayor Pro Tem Ramos Amit is absent today.
Thank you, Saldi. And we'll go ahead and move on to public comment. I do have two comments here. We have the first one from Melissa Dolores.
Thank you, Mayor Ortiz and council members. My name is Melissa Dolores, and I am the Affordable Housing Pipeline Coordinator for Live to Rise. On behalf of Live to Rise, we support adopting the resolution to apply to HCD's Pro-Housing Designation program. We applaud the city for its efforts to increase the production of affordable housing, including the several hundred units that are currently planned and under construction within your jurisdiction. We urge the City Council to direct staff to complete the application and would appreciate the opportunity to consider, together with Live to Rise, collaborative members and other Valley jurisdictions, to leverage the city's application in a way that strengthens housing production across the region. A pro-housing designation benefits the city of Indio and other jurisdictions in the Coachella Valley because historically our region has struggled to compete for resources to support affordable housing production. Many of the current policies the city currently has in place can be applied towards earning designation. Along with the city's policies, the joint efforts of Live to Rise, Housing Can, and the city of Indio can gain additional points in the application. For example, in Category 2, items 2K and 2M overlap with the work Live to Rise is doing in partnership with the city of Indio. Therefore, it can be used to obtain points towards the pro-housing designation. We encourage you to apply and offer our support throughout the process, and we urge you to continue to lean on us for support throughout this application. As we applaud and are grateful for the city's leadership in pursuing important designation, we would also like to highlight the specific concerns with the city's policy recommendation, specifically policy number 1, establishing a local trust fund with designation funding sources. We urge the city to continue to coordinate with local existing funds to maximize resources such as the Coachella Valley Housing Catalyst Fund, and to intentionally consider how a city such as Indio can use a specific fund to coordinate with other existing financial vehicles for maximum benefit. The coordination of funds and other promotes the acceleration of affordable housing. And with that, I just would like to say thank you so much, and we appreciate your support.
Thank you, Ms. Dolores. And we have another request to speak from Mr. Joe Mota.
Good afternoon, Mayor Ortiz and distinguished council members. My name is Joe Mota, and I'm Director of Resident Engagement with Live to Rise. On behalf of Live to Rise, we support adopting a resolution to apply for HCD's Pro-Housing Designation program. We applaud your efforts to increase the production of affordable housing in the city of Indio. Currently, Live to Rise's resident engagement team is working with Indio families from a 25-unit apartment complex that are going through the eviction process and have no place for them to move into, especially at the rent prices that are within their budgetary reach. This is just one of many examples for everyone that housing stability is very insecure, not only here in Indio, but throughout the whole Coachella Valley. As you may be aware, Live to Rise deployed millions of dollars to keep residents housed through our United Lift rental assistance program. We are collaboratively helping to increase the development of affordable housing with our We Live Catalyst Fund by helping fund developers and bring much needed attainable housing. We are also working with residents to keep them housed by searching for resources, coordinating with legal aid, and advocating on their behalf to bring about opportunities that will continue to keep a roof over their heads. We applaud and are grateful for the city's leadership in pursuing this important designation, but we urge the city and staff for deep consideration on how to coordinate existing efforts to leverage current resources than to create a new fund that will be duplicative of work that is currently being done across jurisdictions, attempting to achieve maximum benefits for residents of Indio and other cities throughout the Coachella Valley. We stand ready as a collaborative to support the city to increase affordable housing for all Indio residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mota. And we are about to close our public comments. I saw some people recently walked in. Would you wish to speak? No, not today. Thanks. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item 3.1, Pro-Housing Study Session. Mr. Snyder.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of City Council. My name is Kevin Snyder. I'm your Director of Community Development, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. This afternoon, we're going to be talking about pro-housing, and before I give an overview of that, and I'm going to turn it over to our consultant team, I do want to say and acknowledge that I'm not doing this alone. Jesus Gomez, who's our Housing and Neighborhood Services Manager, is working with me on this, and is a partnership together with our consultant team members who you'll hear from shortly. But we are here today because this is phase 2 of the housing work that we've been doing the last couple of years. As the council may remember, you took the bold step of adopting a new housing element. We were the first one in the Coachella Valley back in April of 2022. From that, we began work on the Pro-Housing Designation. Both these efforts are funded by a state grant called LEAP. So the city was the recipient of a $300,000 grant, and we are using that money to first get our housing element updated, which we did. Second, to look at the opportunity on getting a pro-housing designation. You're going to hear several reasons why a pro-housing designation may be a good idea for the city. I'm going to focus on one in my brief remarks. So one of the opportunities a pro-housing designation brings to the city is increased access to what is sometimes called other people's money. That's in the form of usually state grants. And so for the city, in pursuing several granting opportunities related to housing or infrastructure, having a pro-housing designation may help us get more points. More and more state entities are starting to either require or encourage a pro-housing designation as part of their grant application process. So there's a potential advantage to us. Also, our housing partners who may be pursuing state funding for their projects may also benefit from a pro-housing designation. So again, the increased access to other people's money, along with other possible benefits that you're going to hear about shortly, may be reasons why you might want to consider this designation. I want to make it clear today that this is just a discussion. It's a policy discussion. Council is not being asked to take any action other than at the end of the discussion today, we would hope that you would give us some sort of consensus on next steps. If those next steps include applying for a designation, then we'll be coming back to you separately with a formal request to approve applying for an application. And at that time, we would also seek your approval of the pro-housing plan that is attached to your agenda today. So a couple other things to keep in mind. Pro-housing is a new designation. It's only a couple years old in the state. So we haven't really ground truth this process yet. There are other processes that have been around for a long time, and we can easily tell you how we're going to score best. The scoring in this process is still being worked out. So what our consultant team is going to talk to you about is based on their work, their analysis, their experience working with other jurisdictions, that they believe that we could potentially pursue a designation based on the work that we've done in the draft pro-housing plan that's attached to your agenda and the policies that we're recommending. But again, this is an evolving process, evolving designation process, so we're giving you what we know today. And then the final point, before I turn it over to the team, is just to remind the council that we all recognize that housing is an important topic in our community and every community across the state. And the city of Indio has done a tremendous amount of work from adopting a housing element to approving several recent affordable housing developments that are approximately 600 new affordable housing units in our community, and all the various actions that we are doing across the board to provide increased access to housing in our community. We recognize, and I think the council recognizes, that it's an important issue, and we are working on it strenuously across many different fronts. This is a potential another avenue for the City Council to consider. But again, we're just talking with you today, and we'll await your direction at the end of the conversation if there is any. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Erica Van Sickle and Elizabeth Dixon with DUDEC. Now, they've been before you several times now, and they're going to walk you through a discussion. We're going to limit it to no more than 20 minutes so that the council has the opportunity to give have conversations amongst yourselves and ask questions of staff, and ultimately, if you decide, give us that feedback, recognizing that we have a hard stop at 4 o'clock today. So thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Good afternoon, City Council members. I believe I've met most of you, but my name is Erica Van Sickle, and I'm here today with my colleague Elizabeth Dixon. We're from DUDEC, and so we're here to present the City of Indio's pro-housing plan. Next slide, please. So in addition to myself and Elizabeth, this project is being led by city staff from the city's community development director, including Kevin and Jesus Gomez. So as a quick overview, today we're going to provide just a high-level overview of the current conditions in Indio as they relate to housing, and then provide a pro-housing overview followed by existing policies and recommendations, and then move on to our discussion. Next slide, please. So I believe we presented this slide to you before, but before we want to start off with a very high-level refresher of the housing development trends during the 5th cycle, which was during the years of 2013 to 2021. So as you see on the slide, the graph on the left shows the city's 5th cycle regional housing need allocation in gray, which we refer to as the RHNA, compared to the units that were actually permitted during the cycle, which are shown in blue. And jumping ahead to the city's RHNA numbers for the current 6th cycle housing element on the right, you can see how the RHNA has increased considerably across all 3 income categories for the current RHNA. So while we aren't focusing on those exact numbers today, and I think we are all very well versed in them by now, it's important to consider how the city is planning to increase the units permitted to meet the current housing need across all the income levels, and really focusing on what might need to change in order to get there. So one thing I want to note was that the city did permit more housing units than any other city in the Coachella Valley during the 5th cycle, but it's not just about the number of units. As you saw on the last slide, it's also about the affordability levels and also diversifying the type of housing built. So as you can see on this slide, we're taking a look at the units permitted during the 5th cycle in Indio, specifically by housing type. So it's clear that attached and detached single-family housing units were the most common type permitted, which follows very closely with trends across the Coachella Valley. And this is important because typically single-family housing units are rented or sold at market level. So they make them typically affordable only to above moderate income households. Next slide, please. So here's a visual I wanted to show just to demonstrate what you saw on the last slide, but to really give you a better idea of what housing typologies might look like based on median incomes. So as you can see here, there's a very diverse spectrum of housing, right? It ranges from supportive housing, income-based rental housing, rent-restricted rental housing, and then you have your market rate rental housing and your home ownership. This is, of course, a very simplified graphic, and the housing types and the income levels shown will vary from what is shown here, but just it gives you a good general understanding. So you have the types of housing on the right in the city, but really we're looking at how to diversify the housing stock to include housing across the spectrum. Next slide, please. So now that we understand the type of housing a little more, I want to consider the cost of housing specific to Indio. So I think, again, we're familiar with these numbers, but starting off with housing market trends, housing prices have followed closely to the state's trends, right? So in 2018, the average home price was about $290,000 in the city. It has now increased to approximately $550,000 in the last 5 years. So assuming the typical 20% down payment, your income must be at least about $100,000 for the current home price, or the household income. But as you can see, based on the area median income, which is just under $60,000, only about a fourth of all households in the city, regardless of household size, make enough to afford that. So below that, we have the median rent, specifically for one-bedroom units in Indio, which is the median rent is $1,741. This is based on current rental data available. So based off that same data, the price for a one-bedroom rental, it does range from $1,200 to approximately $2,600, right? So of course it will depend on what rental stock is available, but overall, that's a 22% increase when calculating the year-over-year change in median rents. And so based off that median rental price, your income must be at least about $70,000 to afford the price of rent without being considered rent burden. So
Sorry,
that means,
Eric, I have a quick question. When you're doing this year-over-year change, how many years are you taking into account for that calculation?
Yeah, so it's just 1 year. So it's from 2023. Sorry, gosh, COVID has messed with my years. 2022 to 2023.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, no problem. And so just as a reminder, rent burden means that you're spending more than 30% of your annual income on housing. So an important thing to note here is that median income has increased slightly overall in the city, but Elizabeth, if you could just click your next arrow. But as you can see, so the median income specifically for renter-occupied units is far below the income needed to not be considered rent burden. So no matter the gains in income, they've been really overshadowed by the rental and housing market increases, especially in the last 2 to 3 years. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to show one more slide. It's a repeat from our last presentation, but just to really clarify what we mean when we talk about diversifying a housing stock. Of course, we're considering your typical affordable and all the way to market rate housing, but the city also has a clear need for more diverse housing types, you know, outside of the historical leasing, large lot gated single family homes. And so those varied housing types are often referred to as missing middle housing. Those fall somewhere in between single family and mid-rise apartment buildings. So they can include all, you know, the types you see on the screen, such as townhomes, duplexes, live work units, etc. And those can be expected in your connected neighborhood, your mixed use and midtown land use designations. And so these housing types are really important components, and they can really provide a solution for the mismatch that we've been seeing not only in Indio, but I think across the state, between the available housing stock and the unmet or the shifting housing needs, especially for moderate income families. So next slide, thank you. So now I want to go over the specifics of what pro-housing is, what the pro-housing plan is, what the pro-housing designation is, and why pro-housing as a whole is important. So as I mentioned, we're here to discuss the pro-housing plan today. However, first I want to explain what pro-housing in itself really means, right? So first, pro-housing, it's a set of values backed by actions to address the city's housing needs through the facilitation of planning, approval, and construction of housing. Now, the city has already demonstrated through its housing element that its values are aligned with being pro-housing. So in that you've adopted policies and programs that aim to facilitate and increase housing production. So the next step is to pair those values with actions. And that's where the pro-housing plan can come in. It provides a strategy for realizing those citywide values through commitments to further support the community's housing needs. So in other words, it provides a set of policy recommendations that can further the city's commitment as pro-housing. And Elizabeth will go into depth into this a little later, but those policy recommendations are policies that the city must commit to enacting to pursue an official pro-housing designation from the state, which I will now explain. So now looking at pro-housing specifically as it relates to the designation program. The pro-housing designation is a formal designation through the state's pro-housing program. HCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, designates cities and counties of pro-housing. It's through a non-competitive program that awards those applications that commit to the implementation of pro-housing strategies that are outlined in their application. And the designation, it really provides increased access to grant funding. So what does that mean? So that's one of the biggest advantages to receiving the pro-housing designation. Jurisdictions that are awarded the designation receive an advantage when applying for funding from various state-funded housing, community development, and infrastructure programs, which are you can see on the slide. And so the jurisdictions receive priority processing or additional points when they apply for those grants. And it really gives them a competitive edge, you know, when seeking those, you know, any of the grants you see on the screen. And so affordable housing developers are also better positioned to secure grant funding for projects located in pro-housing designated jurisdictions. So really provides benefit to the jurisdiction in many ways. You know, it also attracts more development and increases the overall housing production and supply of housing. So one comment I wanted to make was that HCD is always also looking to expand the program to other housing and non-housing grant sources. So when they started, I believe they had 3 or 4 grants, and now they've expanded it to 6 in, I think, a matter of 2 years. So, you know, and as a note, again, other grant program applications, if you see the bottom bullet, they strongly encourage applicants to apply for pro-housing designations within their applications. So this includes transformative projects through the Active Transportation Program grant, which the City of Indio often seeks funding for and uses that funding for street improvement projects. Next slide, please. And so the state's pro-housing actions within their application, they're grouped into 4 scoring categories or 4 policy categories in the formal application. So cities must commit to at least 1 policy in each of the 4 categories. And each policy has a set number of points, and it requires a total score of at least 30 points across all 4 categories. So as you see on the slide, the 4 policy categories include favorable zoning and land use, and then accelerating production timeframe, reducing construction and development costs, and providing financial subsidies. So it's important to note that the policies must be implemented within 2 years of submitting the formal application to the state. So in order to maintain the designation, this jurisdiction that applies must be willing to implement the pro-housing policies selected on their application, which of course will require a commitment to the staffing and financial resources needed to implement those programs. Next slide, please. So I want to clarify how this all fits together and just, you know, what is what and what's not interrelated and where we are today versus what's next. So today we're focusing really on the City of Indio Pro-Housing Plan. And of course, you know, that's what we're here to discuss, and which provides the policy, framework, and strategy for becoming pro-housing. Next steps would be to adopt the pro-housing plan, and were you to pursue a formal pro-housing designation through the state, through HCD, staff would then come back to you for formal for approval for application submittal. And then the final step would be to coordinate with HCD throughout the application process to achieve that formal designation and then to implement the policies over the following 2 years. Thank you. So looking beyond achieving a pro-housing designation, I guess kind of jumping back and forth here, and of course the increased access to grants, which would increase overall funding in the city. There's a substantial need for a variety of housing types across affordability levels in the city. So by advancing the city's pro-housing values into actions and implementing pro-housing policies, the city can do a few things, right? The city can really facilitate diverse housing production, implement the housing element, achieve the city's RHNA, and facilitate the production of a variety of housing types for all affordability levels. Because being pro-housing is not just about providing, you know, affordable units, of course important, but it's also about facilitating diverse housing production of both market rate and affordable housing to meet the needs of your community. Next slide, thanks. So before I hand it over to Elizabeth, I want to show you these jurisdictions. This is just an overview of the jurisdictions in the state that have achieved a pro-housing designation to date. So I won't read them over them right now, but those are the ones that have it so far. And one additional benefit that I hadn't mentioned is the Pro-Housing Incentive Program. This pilot program involves a $26 million investment from the state, from the Building Homes and Jobs Trust Fund, and only local governments with pro-housing designations are eligible to apply for the incentive program grant funding. And so this is just an example of, you know, new programs, new incentives, new grants that HCD is currently trying to, actively trying to get that would only be applicable and eligible if you had the designation. And next slide, and I will hand it over to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Erica. And again, I'm Elizabeth Dixon. I'm a planner here with DUDEC. So now I'm going to walk you through some of your existing policies that you already have in place that can help strengthen your pro-housing designation application, as well as the recommendations of the pro-housing plan. So what's been done to date and why does it matter? Well, you've already made a lot of progress that will help you with your pro-housing application if you choose to pursue that designation. This is a long list here on the screen, but I'm just going to touch on a few. Items like the General Plan 2030, this identified areas for higher densities and missing middle housing types. Your Unified Development Code provides objective design standards and allows by right processing for housing in some circumstances. The housing element has several programs that will help you in your pro-housing application, and that commitment to the pro-housing application and designation implementation will actually help you with your housing element implementation as well. We also have fee waivers that are provided for affordable housing. This is through the Coachella Valley Association of Governments, but of course you have a local ordinance for that. And also through recent efforts, the city will be providing fee deferrals for multifamily housing. And so I didn't touch on all of these, but really the intent is to show that the city has already made a lot of progress to facilitate housing production, and you're really well positioned for a strong pro-housing application. So where there's a will, there's a way. All right, so I do want to get into the specific recommended pro-housing policies, but first I want to just give a little bit more context here. The recommended policies of the pro-housing plan are staff recommendations, and these are taken directly from the state's pro-housing designation program. These will guide staff in the development of the pro-housing application. Through the pro-housing application process, if you choose to pursue the designation, there may be some flexibility in the policies themselves. As HCD's review process, it's really subjective, but it's also a collaborative process. And then finally, we recognize that similar to the progress that has been made on the previous slide, each recommended pro-housing policy requires some sort of commitment of resources, either through staff time or funds. Staff has indicated that they will bring some recommended financing tools to you for discussion at a later date. All right, so let's get into the recommended pro-housing policies. I'll walk you through each of them. And again, these are taken from the state's pro-housing program. So we've really worked with staff to select which policies best align with the city's greater goals. So the first one here, and I know we had some comments on this, but this is to establish a local housing trust fund and dedicated funding source. There are actually several structures for a housing trust fund. And what this really is it's a fund that is dedicated for raising funds for affordable housing. And this could be structured as a local trust fund. It could be structured as a regional trust fund. It could be sort of a combined hybrid where it's local and nonprofit. So there's lots of opportunities here. But the key thing is the dedicated funding source, because if there is a dedicated funding source for a housing trust fund, this actually opens up some other grant funding opportunities that are specifically available only for housing trust funds. So there's really money sitting at the state that is inaccessible unless you have a housing trust fund. So regardless of how you structure that, I think having eligibility and access to those funds would really be key here. Next, prioritize general funds for affordable housing. This could be through a direct annual allocation or through new dedicated funding sources. And then, of course, a robust density bonus program. This is supported by the housing element and can provide incentives above and beyond those that are identified in state law. All right, moving on, incentivizing accessory dwelling unit production. This can be through things like reduced standards, dedicated staff, or pre-approved plans. Incentives can focus on providing opportunities for increased accessibility for populations like older adults and those with disabilities. And this will really provide solutions that do not result in a significant increase in parking demand, while also facilitating accessory dwelling unit production. Reducing plan check times for accessory dwelling units and multifamily housing. This can be done through priority permit review, really allowing needed housing types to move to the front of the line to better streamline those permit reviews. And then fee reduction or deferrals for housing for seniors, housing for those with disabilities, large families and lower income households. Fee deferrals for multifamily housing will really address this need, and I know that this is something that the city has been working towards. Next one here, we have reduced transportation-related infrastructure costs through prioritized projects in residential neighborhoods. And this can really be done through building in some equity indicators into the allocation of capital investments, or through the prioritization of community development block grant funds for infrastructure improvement projects to support housing. Next, develop a comprehensive surplus land act program. This would really be going a little bit further than state law requires, where this would provide a reduction in the cost of surplus lands, specifically for affordable housing developers. So after lands are declared surplus, if you have a policy in place that not only prioritizes affordable housing developers for those sites, but also provides some reduction to reduce the overall cost of development for affordable housing. Sure. And then next, establish an enhanced infrastructure financing district. I know that's a mouthful, but what this program really is it uses tax increment financing within a dedicated area to fund infrastructure projects. And through the Pro-Housing Designation, they're recommending that where possible, that these districts be paired with opportunity zones, which are a federal designation. Okay. And a large portion of the city of Indio falls within an opportunity zone. And those opportunity zones, they provide the city with prioritization of federal grants and loans. So there's opportunity for overlap and opportunity for bringing in more money. Okay. All right, and then this is the last couple of policy recommendations. Policy 10, increase housing accessibility through the adoption of universal design standards. Okay. This can really be implemented through an ordinance that provides development incentives in exchange for accessibility features to increase housing opportunities for older adults and those with disabilities. And then finally, policy 11, establish development plans for missing middle housing types. Missing middle housing types, Erica's already touched on it, but this is not a new term for the city. This has really been a priority of the city. And through this program, the city can either, you could work with project applicants to kind of build a library of pre-approved plans, or you could bring on an architect to really work with you to develop pre-approved development plans to really help kind of cut those architectural costs of missing middle housing types. So we are going to open it up for discussion. We just have one prompting question for you. And really based on everything you've heard, the question is, do you want to apply for a pro-housing designation with HCD, the State Department of Housing and Community Development? Today, we're just looking for consensus, and then based on your direction, staff will determine if they will be putting together a pro-housing designation application, and then they'll come back to you for approval for application submittal. So, you know, the big question is, are you willing and able to implement the pro-housing policies? And that's all we have. We're here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I first just want to see if anybody needs clarity on any one of the 11 items here. No?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to I believe it was number 1, the local funding. Can you just go over that one more time? Because I mean, we went through them pretty fast about who the funding we could partner with utilizing those funds.
I think, Councilmember, you're talking about the local housing trust fund?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm happy to discuss that. Let's see, let me get back to sharing my screen here so that I can make it easy and we can follow along. But yeah, just to touch on the Housing Trust Fund. A Housing Trust Fund, it's a program or an organization that raises funds for affordable housing development. And the way that the Housing Trust Fund can be structured, it really is dependent on how you want to structure that Housing Trust Fund. So it can either be a local agency housing trust fund, which basically would be at the local level through a city or county. It could be through a nonprofit housing trust fund. It could be through a regionally structured housing trust fund. Or of course it could be some combination. So a regionally structured housing trust fund would be through like a joint powers agreement where you would all be working together through some sort of a kind of hybrid with a nonprofit component. Having that nonprofit component would allow you to be able to access those private donations that you wouldn't otherwise be eligible for accepting, basically. So, but through that dedicated funding source, and I think that's the key thing, that dedicated funding source would allow you to be able to pursue those state funds, because there are state funds. It's the Local Housing Trust Fund program that it's a grant program that is specific for housing trust funds. So it's up to $5 million a year for those funds, and that's only eligible for housing trust.
And it's a matching program, so just dollar for dollar.
I was just going to, what Erica decided, I think is important, Council. Right now, at least, if the city did proceed with developing a local housing trust fund, we have the benefit of the state matching our investment. So whatever dollar amount the city chose to put into that local housing trust fund, the state would match it. And I think that's an important point. It also, the local housing trust fund would be utilized and focused on Indio. So even if there was a hybrid model, even if it was regionally based, the goal of the program, the focus of the program, and the intent of that program would be to spend that money in Indio. How it's spent would be somewhat structured by the rules and obligations that we have as a trust fund, local housing trust fund. It would have to be housing focused. It could be on housing production. It could be on associated infrastructure costs. But again, it is a program that does provide access to state monies on a one-to-one basis currently, and that would allow the focus to be in Indio.
I appreciate that clarification, Kevin, because that's one of our concerns when we're going after these large pots of money, or if it's a regional effort, to really keep those funds in our city. You know, a lot of times, you know, we've seen that through COVID, it comes to the county and then it's dispersed throughout the county. I think one of our goals moving forward here is to really take care of our residents in the city of Indio, so thank you.
If I could just add one additional point, even if we did end doing a partnership agreement with some entity, a condition of that partnership agreement would be that the funds would be spent in Indio and the focus would be in Indio. So whatever partnership model it takes place, you gave both Elizabeth and Erica gave you some examples. Ultimately, it stays in Indio.
Any other questions on any items? No? Specific? Okay. I had one more question on a specific policy, which was number 7. Could you just go over it again really quick? I didn't catch much of what you said on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So this one, it's the way that you prioritize investments. So specifically, the examples that we have is that you could build in sort of an equity indicator within your allocation process for your capital improvement projects, where that equity indicator would be working to basically prioritize capital improvements within residential areas where you're working to enhance neighborhoods that are in need of investment. And this would be especially important in combination with existing and planned affordable housing development. Another option for how you can approach this policy would be through the prioritization of community development block grant funds for transportation-related infrastructure investments. But really the intent of this is to better connect transportation and housing through those targeted investments.
And Mayor, if I could add, so really what this is offsetting what potentially might be significant costs that an affordable housing developer might have to incur by the city going ahead and making those public investments through prioritization in its capital improvement program. So in essence, the city is offsetting, for example, if there was sidewalk or street level improvements that were needed, and the city made a capital investment in an area, it would reduce potentially the obligation that an affordable housing developer or affordable housing developers in that area would have, which could be a cost savings for them that would allow them to focus more of their money into the actual housing production.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, do you have some questions?
Yeah, a couple. Thank you for the presentation, by the way. So, Kevin, how does this hinder us on regular construction? So we go to a pro-housing. We have every developer, builder here in Indio building single-family homes, which I'm not against, but I'm just saying this makes it as a bigger designation. Does this have any effect on the other housing that comes through? So if Lennar comes in and wants to build a single-family housing, is that frowned upon compared to, you know, the other type of housing we're looking for? Or how does this blend together with continuing to support the other housing? Because Lennar and all these other people are in this to make money, and I understand that. They wouldn't build in Indio if they couldn't sell them. So how does that work?
It really doesn't have an impact on the market. I think what this designation does do and the policies around it is allows us to focus on more diverse housing product type, which I know the council has talked about in the past of wanting to see more diverse housing product type. We obviously have been a large attractor of single-family home, market rate single-family homes. This would give us additional opportunities to explore how to get that what's been termed missing middle housing, which is more diverse housing product type, into our city. It doesn't affect them per se. It doesn't penalize them. It doesn't impede them from doing their development. They obviously still have to comply with all the city's rules and regulations. What this does is focus our energies really towards that missing middle housing, which is where, honestly, a lot of our housing needs are, whether it's more rental housing or more diverse types of ownership housing. So that's really the intent of this designation.
I just don't want to affect our other developers and builders, because there's plenty of room in Indio to build both, and that's where we got to look at it. And I lean towards more homes that can be purchased than rented. I mean, the price of rents are going up extremely high. Those people are actually putting money into somebody else's pocket. We need to come up with manufactured homes, mobile homes, duplexes, quadplexes, other things that you can build at a cheaper price that people can actually buy into and continue to buy. I'm not against apartments, but as you saw the rate, $1,700 for an apartment where you could be putting money into your own pocket, it doesn't make sense for us to continue to push towards that, even though we do need that housing as a scrap right in between, you know, to get us through where we need to get, because obviously you can't build houses overnight. But I'd like to see us go forward with more mobile homes and modular homes and duplexes and condos and other stuff that are less expensive, because as you saw, the price of houses going up, but the problem with that is most individuals can't purchase those homes. Most of those are people coming from out of the area who are coming that have sold their home in LA or wherever, retired, taking the rest of their savings and buy that, which I'm not against either. But like I said, we need to start looking towards it. The only way you're gonna be able to build a mobile home park or manufactured homes, and we have some beautiful ones. Rancho Casablanca is a good one. There's a couple others that really blend in really nicely. I think we have to go after them. I don't think it's, you know, sitting here and say we got a piece of property and go forward. So this will give us a plan to do that kind of opportunities to go move forward.
Yes, I believe so. I think well, first of all, your planning commission and yourselves have done an immense amount of work around making the streamlining of the entitlement process, the overall land use regulatory environment that has facilitated, I think, some differentiation of housing product type. We've seen that most recently in more multifamily housing being proposed in our community. What we're talking about with these policies is other ways to get at what you're talking about, Councilmember, where we can push into that diverse housing product type, and we can offer opportunities, whether it's, for example, having, one of the examples was universal development plans. Well, every step we take to make it easier for the private sector market to build in our community, whether it's market rate or affordable, is one less cost center for them, which reduces ultimately the cost to the consumer. So, individually, these may not be huge cost savings. Cumulatively, they start to add up. Yep. And the more the city streamlines its approval processes, and again, we've done a great job, I think, in creating, you saw the long list of things that we have done over the last several years. All that's been towards the goal of this missing middle housing that's on the screen right now. So I think this does help us, and then it's just working towards the outcomes and following the overall direction of the city council relative to your goals for housing in the community.
Okay, and just a couple more. And then, so if we do this fund, we go into partnership with, let's say, Lift to Rise or Housing Coalition and that, or any other group. Since it's our money, it kicks in prevailing wage. Do I take it that way? Even though it's affordable housing, they will pay prevailing wage if we help them in some way.
Well, that's always an interesting question. I think we would look at every situation, how we utilize funds. We would follow the legal parameters, work with our city attorney's office and our city manager to see what options are available. Where it is legally required, obviously, we would follow the rules of the state. But around affordable housing, there are some considerations that aren't always available to market rate housing, and we would certainly want to explore those to limit the cost centers. So where appropriate, we would try to apply those funds. But at the end of the day, if we have to follow the rules, we'll follow the rules.
And with that, I agree, because then it just throws out the savings, because the last apartment complexes that with transportation in the city of Coachella were almost $500,000 a door, which is unaffordable for most people. And if it's a rent, nobody's ever going to make back their money. It's just not a good investment. But with ours, if we got an opportunity, maybe we need to look outside the box, because we're running short on power. Sewer and septic is a very high expense cost to it. Maybe we need to start building some kind of infrastructure and some of those other parts in place so that the developers don't have to spend the money on that. There's other ways to be constructive and be able to get to the goal we need to do and cut costs for people without going into the prevailing wage or other stuff. And I'm talking, I don't know how we'd set it up, that's something the attorney have to, but maybe for affordable housing or mobile home parks or RV parks or whatever it is that we could get as much bang for a buck. But if we could get those costs knocked down where we would pay for it and it would benefit the whole city, it would just happen that those people wouldn't have to pay as much hookup fees or as much to build electricity. As you know, some of the other housing we have now can't build because they don't have any electricity. They're losing time, they're losing money. Maybe if we invested in that, we could get away with being able to support them without actually getting them kicked into prevailing wage, and we could lower the price of houses or the park down so that people could afford to buy a house. So I think there's different ways to do it.
And if I could add the recommendation around prioritization of capital improvement dollars on an equity basis, but it's also tied into the city's economic development. The more diverse housing product type we have, the more opportunities we have to create local jobs and with folks that can live in our community and work in our community. So it's all kind of tied together. So these capital investments, as one of the recommendations of prioritizing capital investments, it's not only about quality of housing access, it's also about quality of economic development opportunity and providing that supportive housing situation so that our citizens do have that opportunity to live and work in our city.
Very well said. I agree. Thank you.
And so I have a couple of thoughts, and jumping in on that last statement. I mean, we have spent a whole lot of time and heart, and we've really put our heart and soul into the housing element, and we all agree we all see the importance of different levels of affordable housing and middle housing. But just the comment that you just made, I mean, we have so many people that get in their cars or in the transportation that's not that great in the desert and drive someplace else to work. So we're adding more houses or more apartments or more whatever so that people can get in their cars and go to work. So separate from what I was going to say with respect to this, that's a challenge. I don't see that tie-in. I'd like to. I appreciate it. I'd love to, but I'm not sure I see that tie-in. The jobs are to the west of us, and sadly, they are in the hospitality community, which is an ongoing issue with lower paying wages. So I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around this. I struggle with some of this. I struggle, first of all, with all of the challenges, all the rules, all the state dictating what we do and how we do it and when we do it and where we do it. I struggle with pre-approved plans. Yes, we need middle housing. Yes, we need affordable housing. I totally agree and embrace that. I'm just struggling with the requirements, establishing a trust fund and a dedicated funding source. incentivizing ADU development. I am struggling a little bit with this and how it benefits overall in the bigger picture, the city of Indio and the people that live there. Councilmember Miller, I think you made some really great ideas and suggestions. Apartments don't necessarily create wealth, but having and renting a rental environment, but having the kind of community where somehow people can buy in, having lower end, whether it's the condos or some of the other kinds of communities, I think is actually a benefit to our residents. And then the last question is, you know, we can go through all of this, but at the end of the day, you know, ensuring that it's our residents that can take advantage of these lower income apartments is important. Right now, the state doesn't allow us to dictate that. So little challenged with this designation, supportive of everything we've done in the housing element, supportive of our need to ensure that we have housing types of different levels, but
So Councilmember, those are all great points. I have a couple of thoughts, if it's okay, Mayor, to respond to. So first of all, yes, we have a lot of our citizens that leave our community for work. Approximately 74% of our working citizens go to another community for work. We are working very hard to bring more people into our city that will employ those citizens that will give that opportunity to work locally. Bluntly, that has a side effect because that's they're going to buy their gas in Indio. They're going to buy that sandwich in Indio. They're going to go shopping at lunchtime for a new shirt or a pair of pants. All those things have benefits when people are working in Indio, not just the employment and the wage opportunity, but also the indirect benefit through sales tax and things like that to the city. So we are working very hard to put forward into your regular meeting agenda. There's a proposal for you for a fee deferral program to encourage some of those businesses to further come into our city. So that would be an opportunity for you to look at that as an economic advantage. But when you think about a city's economic development, you can't detach it from the housing supply that it has, because if there is not adequate housing supply, many employers will not seriously look at a community. We're working really hard to make sure that we have that adequate housing supply. And so whether or not you decide pro-housing designation is the way to do that, that work continues. The pro-housing designation, so this is a state designation, and it does require us to do some things. You as a city council, as the legislative body for the city, you can decide whether or not you want to agree, for lack of a better word, to do those things and commit the resources, whether they be financial or staff or both. So this is a proposal. By no means is the council required to go any further than today. You could tell us, great idea, but not right now, and that's fine. We've done the work to get us to this point of conversation with you, but at the end of the day, this is a policy decision, and absolutely respect that the council has to weigh a lot of different competing thoughts. And then the issue of prioritization, just real quickly, that is a tough issue because we do have the fair housing rules of the federal and state governments that do limit cities' abilities to prioritize who can get into these units. We work very hard with our applicant parties to try to get as many of those Indio residents into these complexes, but there are limitations.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder, and I agree on that last part. I've been working with Mr. Snyder and actually talking to all of our other offices, state and federal, and seeing how we can help in being able to prioritize our local residents for these projects, because if we're not able to, I think there might be some unnecessary backlash from our community if our people aren't getting housed in those projects. But we are seeing a lot of cooperation from the developers in helping us make sure that Indio residents are going into these facilities first. Mr. Furman, wanted to give you a chance to speak.
Yeah, I'll just follow up. You know, I think when we look at this pro-housing item, I don't think it's going to affect our developers, our single home developers, because when we're developing communities, complexes, whether it's townhomes, live to work, apartment complexes, we're not going to put those so far away where it's not feasible for people to get to school, get to churches, get to the store, grocery stores, whatever it is. So these complexes are going to be in the inner city. They're not going to be out in the outskirts of our cities, you know, in some of our areas. So I don't think it's going to affect those developers. However, we have to come up with mechanisms that's going to support affordable housing, also going to support grants coming to our city. We've applied for many grants, and some we didn't get because, you know, because of some issues like this, we weren't competitive as some of the other cities who had the some of these pro-housing elements. And the second thing is we do have a workforce, and we have the biggest workforce in the Coachella Valley that does go to other cities to work. However, they still live here. We have folks who graduate, go to college, and want to come back to our city, but they can't because the rents are too high or they can't qualify to buy a house yet. But we're constantly asking them, hey, come back to our city. Come back to Indio. We want you to come home. But they can't because they can't live here or in the Coachella Valley. The other thing is that we have folks who right now, who are from our city, who are homeless right now, sleeping in cars. And I think we have to look at every avenue we can to support affordable and attainable housing in our city. And also what's going to help us get grants, because we're not a bank, right? We don't have these funds just sitting around. And I know it's been said already, but that missing middle housing, we really have to look at that. We have to look at modular homes. We have to look at, I know we're working on some live to work projects in our city. I think those are great, and that's going to help us. And instead of looking at affordable housing, we have to look at affordable living situations. How do we make it affordable? How can somebody have a family that lives in downtown Indio, their kids go to Jefferson Middle School, they work downtown Indio where they don't have to get in the vehicle and drive, or they work at the county building, they could just walk. And I think you know, some of these initiatives assist us in that. And the other thing is, this is something that we haven't done, you know, so, you know, passing our housing element, the first one in the Coachella Valley to do it, that's something we you know, dove in head first and did. And so I think we have to look at initiatives like this to move forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Furman. I also wanted to add, you know, I was in a meeting the other day, which was the 211 state of need, and they were showing, the county was showing all the calls that get to 211 for help. What's that? Oh, sorry. And they were showing that the amount of calls that they get for housing is far above any other service that our residents are requesting. And so to me, this is a way, these policies, you know, our residents really deserve this. And this is, considering the crisis that we're in, these are very reasonable policies. We're looking at, you know, stabilizing our families, stabilizing our workforce, keeping money in our community, you know, and we can look at other issues of ownership. I think you're right in that. And I've even been thinking about how do we start some way to prevent corporations from buying our homes and renting them to our own people, because that's just money that's leaving, instead of building wealth, as you mentioned, that's money that's leaving our community. And as rents go higher and higher, more and more money is leaving our community. More and more parents are working 2 jobs to get by. And I think all of those are unhealthy things for our city and for our community. So I really support this. I know we do have to look into the details with all these policies, but I support moving this forward and making sure that we're working, you know, with our nonprofit organizations to see how we can leverage those trust funds. And I know when we say something, I like to focus, I want to make sure that our funds stay in Indio, right? But in that collaborative process, we're able to, you know, if we only have $400,000 in our housing funds, we can help get a project through in, let's say, Cathedral City, and get that money back, right? Those are loans that are going to be coming back to these programs, from my understanding. But I definitely think that we should look at those opportunities with Live to Rise, where we can leverage our funds with other local funds to make sure we're pushing the most projects regionally as we can, not only in the city of Indio, but also I will be looking for other ways that we can get some legislation passed to allow us to prioritize our local residents. I think that's beneficial for everybody, especially when we're talking about the issues of displacement, right? If we really wanted to deal with displacement, then we should be able to prioritize city residents and then local area residents for these projects. But that's something that we'll push on the side of this. But I guess at this point, we'd have to look at our council members and see who's willing to support moving forward with this process and recommending staff to push this forward. Ms. Ramos?
question, if I may. Do any other cities in the Coachella Valley have the, working down the path or have the pro-housing designation at this point?
It's a great question, Councilmember. I noticed from anecdotal conversations with some of my peers that several cities are looking at this. I think we are the farthest along as of now. And you saw the list of that statewide. There's been a limited number of so far. Again, it's a new program. So I think if we ultimately did go forward, I believe in this Southern California region, we might be the third, at least based on that list today.
And to me, that might be actually a benefit, right? We're going to be one of the first ones in line to have these this priority designation for grants that we need. And that's, including infrastructure grants that we're looking for. Right now, we still need funds for our Avenue 44 bridge. We still need funds for our Jackson Bridge. And, a TCC grant, $35 million that we could be having priority, right? That could have set us over the edge last time. So besides the fact that these are policies that are very reasonable for our community, I think it's also going to have that beneficial side impact of helping us get priority for these funds.
So again, all we're asking for is if there's a consensus of the council to move forward, we'll come back to you with separate action requests, at which time the council can consider whether or not you want to formally approve. We're just seeking your consensus today on whether you want us to move forward to the next step of preparing the necessary documentation for your approval to apply.
All right, well, we'll just go down the line. Mr. Miller, what do you think?
I'm in favor.
In favor? Thank you. I'm also in favor. Mr. Furman?
I believe with our workforce, our large senior population, and our workforce and families, we have to pursue this. So I do support it. And our veterans, and our veterans.
I support the concept, but I have reservations about the program. So at this point, I do not support it.
Thank you.
And I think it's what staff brings back too. I mean, I think we're all open to looking at what it is. It's really what they bring back and how it's going to affect us in an overall explanation of what it's going to move forward with. So I think that's where we're at. Yeah, exactly.
Sounds good.
And Mayor, just to clarify, what staff would bring back would be a resolution that would be necessary for making the application that would show council support. So that would be for action consideration. We'd also bring back a resolution action on adoption of the pro-housing plan that's attached this afternoon to your study session agenda. And that adoption of that would be indicative to HCD, Housing and Community Development, of the city's willingness to commit. So there'll be, in the future, two separate actions the council consider, and at that time you can decide if you truly want us to go into the application process with HCD.
And Mayor, I might just add that there are a number of other options other than the 11 that were selected that are eligible for points. And so if there is a council member, as you review the attached document, one of them maybe quite doesn't sit well with you, let us know. We could research another option to consider for the final plan, because there are more options than just what was submitted. These are clearly the most concise, but there are others.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Schneider. You have everything you need from us? All right. All right, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting and go into our closed session. All right, we'll go ahead and open our closed session. Can I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor. For the record, all council members are present except for Councilmember Ramos Amit.
Thank you. And do we have any public comments this?
None, Mayor.
None? Thank you. We'll go ahead and adjourn the closed session. Do we have any? No?
Hang on. I
got
just need to let the public know that I'll be recusing myself on items 3.3, 3.4, and 3.5 due to the fact that I own real property within 500 feet of these decisions, so I will be stepping out.
Thank you, Councilmember. We could address those first, then we can break her in after. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, after you guys eat all the food.
Okay.
So you could turn it off?
Okay. Judy, what's your phone number in case?
All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Thank you all for joining us today. Can we get a roll call, please, Sabdi?
Councilmember Furman,
Present.
Councilmember Holmes,
Present.
Councilmember Miller,
Present.
and Mayor Ortiz.
Present.
And to reflect, Mayor Pro Tem Ramos Amit is absent today.
Thank you. And then for our invocation, we have Pastor Christian Sly from Garden Fellowship Church. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Possibly. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you so much, Lord, for the privilege that this council has to serve this community. God, to offer vision and insight and protection, God, and I ask that you give them wisdom and continued favor as they lead and guide, Lord, the place that we all live and enjoy. So, God, just be about this meeting, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Then, Talia, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Right, we'll move on to City Attorney report on closed session.
Thank you, Mayor. There are no items to report out of closed session today.
Thank you. Do you have the scripts? Just do it here.
What's the next item?
We're going to do the presentations. We have 3 presentations today. We have a proclamation for Black History Month, proclamation for National Cancer Prevention Month, and we have a recognition for the Shadow Hills High School boys wrestling team. So we'll go through these one by one. We have our Black History Month proclamation, which says, whereas the origins of Black History Month date back to 1915, when historian Dr. Carter G. Woodson and Minister Jesse E. Moreland founded the organization known today as the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And whereas observing Black History Month is an opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of African American history, acknowledge the long and ongoing struggle for equality and freedom, and honor the accomplishments of Black Americans in every area of endeavor throughout history. Whereas on the world stage, Indio is famous for its date production, having learned cultivation techniques from both the Persian Gulf and Northern Africa, where dates such as the Deklet Nor are native. And now, therefore, I, Oscar Ortiz, along with the Indio City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of February 2023 as Black History Month in the city of Indio. Any comments from council?
I do. So it's February, so happy Black History Month, and I'm proud that we're doing this, and I'm also proud that we're recognizing that the date that we so famously rave in our community is also native to Africa, and I think that needs to be represented. And so I'm very pleased that we're representing that here. Historically, we utilized the Arabian theme for recognizing the dates, but I think as we move forward as a community, we're really displaying how inclusive we are in our city. So I thank the city staff and council for this proclamation.
Thank you, Councilmember Furman. Anyone else? No. Good. Good. All right. I also wanted to say, a happy Black History Month, and just wanted to share that this is a really special proclamation for me, because for me, I didn't really know much of my own history until I actually was working with some organizations out in Los Angeles, and they were mainly African-American organizations, and through them, teaching them about their history, I kind of learned that I needed to do some research into my own history and learn about, even now when we think about our history here of the Cahuillas, I think many of us don't really know the history there, right? What transition happened there from this being Cahuilla land to this being the city of Indio. And so I think it's always good to keep learning about our history, whether it's our own culture or other cultures as well. The more we know about the histories and the mistakes and the successes that have been that have happened in the past here in our country, the more we'll be ready for the future. So happy Black History Month again. Our second proclamation is for National Cancer Prevention Month. It says, whereas National Cancer Prevention Month focuses on the things we can control to lessen our odds of developing cancer. 5 of the top recommendations for lessening our risk include regular exercise, maintaining a healthy weight, eating healthy foods, quitting or never starting to smoke, and limiting alcohol use. And whereas we urge every resident to get back on track with their recommended screenings, and we implore the public and private sectors to increase access to early detection for individuals and communities. Whereas the City of Indio thanks the doctors, nurses, researchers, caregivers, and advocates who are dedicated to finding treatments and cures and reducing the pain and burden of cancer. Our nation and city's healthcare workers continue to provide care and support to cancer patients and their loved ones, even as the global pandemic made their jobs more difficult and demanding, and our city is forever grateful. Now, therefore, I, Oscar Ortiz, along with the Indio City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of February 2023 as National Cancer Prevention Month in the City of Indio, and urge all to help increase awareness of what we can do to prevent, detect, and treat and control cancer. Thank you. Council, any comments on that end? No, I just wanted to reiterate, a big thank you to our healthcare workers who have been helping us in improving, also our researchers, right, that help us improve our techniques for detecting cancer. I recently had a close friend who had a cancer and detected it early, and luckily he's okay now and he's getting better. So just a big thank you to our healthcare workers who help our families through some of those really tough times and are helping us detect these cancers before it's too late for our family members in our community. And third, we have our third presentation for tonight. We have the recognition of Shadow Hills High School Boys Wrestling Team. If you would like to join us up here, and Council, if you'd like to join me down to meet them.
Are they here? Yeah. Are they ready to go?
Thanks for joining us. Congratulations. Congratulations.
We're getting bigger all the time, or I'm getting smaller. One or the other.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Thanks for joining us. How you doing? How you doing? I'm gonna stand behind you guys.
Come on, you guys come in here.
Oh wait. Usually I could stand in the back and everybody sees me.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're getting bigger.
Yes. We're shrinking. Hold it in the front. Oh, okay. Is this working? Can you hear me there? Yeah? Okay. So today we are recognizing this team because actually, usually we have athletic teams here and we're recognizing them for their incredible athletic performance, and today we're actually recognizing them for their academic performance. This team here, the Shadow Hills wrestling team, has the highest team GPA in Riverside County. Wow. So they're really, you know, a great example for the rest of our community in how they have their priorities straight, right? They need to have their GPA up and need to have all options open for the future, whether that's in athletics or any other career that they want to pursue in the future. So we really thank you guys for your commitment. We know that your performance in academics is also going to help our community overall, right? We need all kinds of career scientists, mathematicians, environmental scientists, teachers. So police officers, there you go. And so we know that this is going to be, you guys are on the right page right now and in the right direction, and this is going to be a great benefit for all of us. So thank you, and we appreciate you. Councilmember?
Congratulations. This is such an honor. It's an honor to be up here with you guys. You're so hardworking. You definitely, I agree, moving in the right direction, but no pressure. Obviously, you spend a lot of time and a lot of energy doing what you do and doing it well. Congratulations 100 times over.
Congratulations on your, not only academics, but also your sports. I understand from Scott Trujillo is that you're actually very, very good at wrestling. So congratulations, and thank you for what you do, and thank you for leading the way in academics.
I just want to say congratulations as well. You know, it's hard to, you know, play any sport, but to keep your grades that high, that just shows the hard work and dedication that you guys put into this. Also, the parents that are here, thank you for your commitment and supporting our student athletes, because statistics show that if you're involved in organized activities, whether it's sports, ASB, and those kind of things, it does make a more successful member of society. So we appreciate what you're doing. And you know what they say about the Knights, right? They do it right. So congratulations.
Perfect. Jace.
I know a lot of their parents. So thank you.
Okay, and we'll move on to our next item, which is our report from our Youth Advisory Council, and we have Talia Randolph.
Good evening, City Council members. My name is Talia Randolph. Since the last time YAC has attended a City Council meeting, we have completed our videos for the 60-second substance abuse film and art project contest in Riverside. We are submitting a poem, an art project, and a film. We also finished our videos for Directing Tane's film contest. The contest video categories are suicide prevention, mental health, through the lenses of culture, an animated short, and lastly, the category of walk in our shoes. We also have one video to present.
Awesome.
Hi.
So, are you okay? I'm fine. I'm here for you.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Great message and great quality. What cameras did you use for that?
I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
It's a 35 millimeter.
And was that all with the equipment at the teen center?
That was only Mia's and Sophia's video.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, thank you. And is that the end of your comments? Yeah. All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to our city manager reports and information.
Thank you, Mayor. I know each of you might talk about the parade and the fair coming up. It's back, so I'll let you take that discussion forward when you have your time for reports. But Councilmember Furman and I have been talking, as was proclaimed, as Black History Month, and there is an opportunity in the city to name a street, a facility, a building, a sports complex, whatever it might be, in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. And as staff begins exploring that opportunity, there may be some input you have today or within the coming weeks that you could let us know of your interest or some ideas. Of course, we're building the sports complex on Jackson. We have some public facilities being built, the public safety facilities, roadways such as Civic Center Drive. One discussion there is maybe trying to limit the number of addresses that may have to be changed if the street is normally formally changed. Civic Center might be an example, one where it's a very prominent street but does not have a lot of addresses to adjust. But there are other ideas, and so really to just open up a real brief discussion on any guidance you can provide, and this is something, of course, we would bring back for further discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Furman, I know you brought this up at our Martin Luther King Jr. event at the church the other day, so I'd like to have you share
thank
some
you.
comments.
I think this is just another opportunity for us to recognize someone prominent in our American history. I know it's Black History Month, but Black history is American history. And in our city, we do recognize other leaders and other prominent figures in our community. And I think Black History Month is really a time where we really need to reflect on the contributions that the African American people have made to our country. And I think this is an opportunity to do that by naming a street or a building after Dr. Martin Luther King. I did do some research, over the last few weeks, and just looking at our county, there's only one street that has actually one city that has a street named after Dr. Martin Luther King. But there's thousands in our country. There's some in foreign countries, as far as Italy and Puerto Rico, which is American territory. There's streets. So there's streets throughout our world dedicated to Dr. Martin Luther King. And in conversation with our city manager, we looked at some possibilities. And, initially I looked at Highway 111, but, there is criteria that you have to meet, and that's a state highway. So I think that process would be a drug out process. But I do like Civic Drive because we are in the middle of working on our downtown. We're in the middle of planning a new city hall in this whole area. And I think that gives us opportunity to do that as well. There was some other ideas as well, but I think traditionally some of those other streets like Oasis or some of the streets in Old North Indio, I think that's part of our tradition. But Civic Drive it's just Civic Drive. That's what it is. But I think that's an opportunity for us to recognize an African-American figure in our city. And also, it'd be the first, if we move this direction, it'd be the first in the Coachella Valley. And Indio would be the first one. So I just think it's a great idea. And like I go back to my initial comments, this month gives us time to really reflect on the contributions of folks, especially Dr. Martin Luther King.
Thank you, Councilmember Furman. Does anybody else have any comments?
Absolutely. I completely agree. I think Civic Center is a little too small of a street really to name. I think I would like to see something a little bit more significant in remembrance. Something like the sports park, I think would be outstanding. If we're gonna really recognize and remember such a great figure in our history, it really needs to stand up and be counted, as they say. So I would support, something like a large structure, a large park, something that would really do his honor justice.
Thank you, Councilmember Holmes. Councilmember Miller?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I kind of concur with Councilmember Holmes. I think a street, especially a small one, and changing it, maybe our new library, because Martin Luther King was big on education and education for other individuals, or our sports park, because it brings people together, families together, I think would have a big significance more than a street that just comes in a little bit too, even though it is a prominent street for us because we'll have our new downtown. But I think naming maybe our park after Martin Luther King, or like I said, our new library where people go to learn, I think would be a great opportunity.
Thank you, Councilmember Miller. Any responses?
I just think, the sports park, it'd be a better correlation to somebody that's in sports. And, when you're changing street names, there's criteria. So it can be longer than 5 miles and things like that. So there's criteria. And I think if we decide to move forward, this is it's not an agenda item. I think the city manager could bring us back some possibilities, whether it's a building, whether it's a street. Then at that point, we could agendize it. I think right now you're just looking for direction or a consensus of doing something in this nature. I just like Civic Drive myself.
Thank you. I also I like 2 of those ideas, and Civic Center Drive, I think it's a good one, especially being right here next to our city hall, and our government processes. A lot of its work did affect how our government works, and bringing equality through legislation and policy. So I think Civic Center Drive would be good, and also we're going to have College of the Desert here, right across the street. So that'd be a good way to, remind our students about Black history when they're walking around campus, right? I think the library is also a good idea. I do like that as well. But I think I'm leaning more towards the road as well, especially after finding out that there's only 2 in Riverside County. I think that's pretty big. And sorry, there's only 1. We would be the 2nd in Riverside County. And there is none in the whole Coachella Valley. I think that's pretty significant for us to make that kind of commitment.
Great. We'll work on some ideas then and bring this back for action.
Thank you. All right, and we'll move on to report on City Council external internal boards. Ms. Holmes, would you like to go ahead?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Okay, a couple of board meetings or commission meetings. One is at Coachella Valley Transportation Commission. Of note there, we had been talking with the state on an effort for the middle mile broadband, and we were really lobbying for that to go down where CV Sync is. It's where all of the signals are being channeled and directed. However, the state came back and decided to go down I-10. Easier, quicker, faster, more cost-effective. So I think we're all a little disappointed. Highway 111, where CV Sync is moving, I think we all felt that would have been an optimal place to do the middle mile broadband. But the powers that be at the state of California spoke, and so it's going down. It's going to go down I-10. We also learned that the state of California has a $22.5 billion shortfall, so that's a little bit of a challenge. We anticipate, some earmarks in the future. We know that we have $1.5 million secured for the Monroe interchange. That's only a small piece of that, but we hope there's more there. The other one is the Coachella Valley Conservation Commission that I attended. Of note there is the acquisition of 9 parcels, which is almost 900 acres in the Thousand Palms Conservation Area. And it's so much land that's continuously conserved in one segment. I have not been up there. I understand it is absolute breathtaking scenic beauty. And to have all that contiguous acreage there is really something that we don't have at this point in our greater Coachella Valley. And it's really nice to be able to keep that and keep those lands for our future generations. A couple of other things I wanted to talk about. Well, of course, the fair's coming to town after what, a year, 2 years on hiatus. It'll be fun. I know they made some changes. Looking forward to it. It starts on the 17th. It should be great. I encourage everyone to attend. There's a parade on the 20th, and it'll be a blast. So please go to the fair right on Highway 111 there. Attended the art show put on by the Rotary Group this year, even better than last year. It just gets better and better. Really nice art. I bought a couple of pieces there. Lots of people were milling. Lots of people, it seemed, were purchasing. It was a beautiful, picture-perfect Chamber of Commerce day. I look forward to when we get our amphitheater built. That'll be a perfect place for it. That'll be nice. Let's see what else. I wanted to shout out Layla to our Arts Commission for those utility boxes. As I drive around the street, I see all these really cool utility boxes. They're beautiful. They're different, they're diverse, they have different themes to them, and I just love them. I'm so happy that we're moving forward and doing such a significant number of them. I think they really beautify our city, so thank you, and thank you for the team for moving that forward. Yesterday I had fun. Part of the neat part about being a council member are some of the fun things we get to do. I decided to go to the Senior Center for their Palentine's lunch. It was packed. It was a blast. There were just upwards of 75 people there. There was live music. Some of the older couples were dancing. Love is in the air. It was just a beautiful day, really meant to commemorate not just relationships but friendships of all type. And I just want to thank everyone. There's an enormous number of volunteers that put that together. I got to tell you, our staff quietly goes above and beyond to make these events extra special. So really wanted to give a big shout out to all the staff at the Indio Senior Center. And one other thought, and I want to see how the rest of the council thinks about this. Mm-hmm. At the Senior Center, at various places throughout, as I'm out and about, there's a concern that it's no longer the county fair in Indio or whatever. It's all Greater Palm Springs. Now, I sat on that board, so I get the thought process, but I feel like we're losing a little bit of our identity here. And I think we need to do something. I think we need to stand up and be counted a little bit more. Yeah, we're part of the Greater Palm Springs. I know all of the research that has been done because it's something that people recognized. I'm here to tell you, Indio's recognized. And so what do we do? How do we wrap our arms around that so that we encourage things like the fair and some of the other events to say, in Indio, California, part of the Greater Palm Springs or something of that nature. We gotta fix that. In my opinion. And so ends my diatribe, perhaps.
Appreciate it. Do we have any suggestions for how we would go about that?
We'll think it through, but I think those that she provided would be a good start. We just need to get our name out there.
Okay. And then I had a question on the Conservation Commission.
Mm-hmm.
On those 900 acres, what was the action taken there?
We approved the resolution for the acquisition of those 9 parcels for an amount not to exceed $1.3 million plus closing and transaction costs.
Oh, so it was 9 parcels and how many acres?
Over 885 acres.
Oh, wow.
So it's the largest continuously conserved land in one segment. So,
that's amazing.
And it connects a whole lot. I just think that's really terrific.
That's awesome.
And it's part of talking about the Chuckwalla National Monument, the designation and expansion of the Joshua Tree National Park. So that's really, something for the ages.
Yeah,
to look forward to.
That's great news. I go hiking out there sometimes. There's some amazing views out there.
That's what I hear.
Yeah.
I'll get out there, definitely.
Mr. Furman?
Well, we also flow over that area. Well, I want to continue with Councilmember Holmes' sentiments about getting our name out there. We had this discussion, I want to say last year, and that was kind of the basis for some of our marketing and some of our Indio signs that we see around our city. So we're working on it. I feel the same way when I hear, I love our partners in Palm Springs, but we're Indio. And I mean, if you follow my social media, that was one of my last posts. It was our Indio sign and our Ferris wheel from the Coachella Fest. I mean, we're the city of festivals. We have the biggest music festival in the world. We had the Day Festival, Tamale Festival, that was great. And so we'll continue to work on that marketing, you know, and it's just getting the word out there and putting our name everywhere, you know. So because we do wear Indio on our sleeve, and we're proud of our community, and we're proud of where we have gone. So that's a great point. So thank you for bringing that up. I did have a couple committees. I did have the CVAG Public Safety Committee, which I chair. And first off, we had one item that I had to recuse myself, and it was the closing of Chuckawalla State Prison, which will be closing in March of 2025. And it's just a lot of concerns dealing with that in the community of Blythe. And some of our residents here in Indio in the Coachella Valley that are employed there. It's going to be a hit to the economy. The state has other ideas as far as housing inmates, different parts of the state, excuse me. And so they're looking to close multiple facilities throughout the state, and Chuckawalla is one of the first ones. So those are going to be ongoing conversations, but being that I'm still employed by that same department, I go into the audience and I just listen in, but I could report on it. At this point, our Public Safety Committee is going to ask Executive Committee to work with the City of Blythe in actually exchanging prison closures, which would be the City of Norco is looking to close CRC, or they're recommending closing CRC, which is California Rehabilitation Center. So Blythe is looking to swap with them. So it'll be working with the state. We'll see how that happens. However, we did have another item which was very important to our community, and it was an update by the county of the asylum seekers that are coming here from other countries. And I'll read some of the stuff that we have from that. And just as an update, the Riverside County Asylum Seeker Response Program started in March of 2021 to support the U.S. Customs and Border Protection response to asylum seekers entering the county. The Asylum Seeker Response Program is comprised of many county departments, including public health, behavioral health, public social services, Riverside County Probation Department, to address various social services needed, including mass care and shelter coordination, meal operation, travel assistance, and other wraparound services. And also, this is supported by our nonprofits in our faith-based community and our city. The asylum seekers also receive short-term transitional services that include testing and sheltering that's needed to address COVID-19. To this date, the county has received approximately 67,000 asylum seekers, mostly from Cuba, Brazil, Peru, and Venezuela. And something that I really struck out to me was that there's only 3 counties participating in this program, which I don't think is fair to Riverside, Imperial, and San Diego counties. So we asked staff to work with our partners to see if there's any way that that could be expanded, being that asylum seekers are still coming into our country. However, there's been 2 incidents where we had asylum seekers that were released on our streets because of the influx of seekers, and also the holidays. The county resources were exhausted. We had the winter storms, and also Southwest flights were canceled around that time, if you remember. So that led to 2 dates of asylum seekers being released on our streets. So we're going to ask our staff to see if they could work with the county and our federal and state partners to see that doesn't happen again, and if we could work with other counties to also take on the influx of seekers. When they do come into our county, they're here approximately 2 days before they're transferred to their sponsors seeking their court dates. So I'll keep you posted on any other further details as that moves along. Also, I had a CVEC meeting and Governors Committee meeting, both surrounded around the topic of governance after the 1934 agreement expires at the end of 2033. And currently, right now, the Local Agency Formation Commission, which is known as LAFCO, has received funding to conduct a study on the options for this region. And their study will only provide options and not recommendations. Therefore, the Coachella Valley Energy Commission felt it was necessary to provide LAFCO with examples of alternatives to consider from feedback from the council, from the committee. So those alternatives for governance are Joint Powers Authority, which is known as JPA, and Municipal Utility District, which is the MUD. And we submitted a letter to LAFCO basically saying that is what we prefer and we think that will work. However, LAFCO is still in the middle of their study, and when they get back to us, I'll also report that, but we submitted that letter on behalf of the Coachella Valley Energy Commission. And also, yesterday I was at College of the Desert, where I was a guest speaker for the Black Student Success Center and the Office of Student Life, where they do like a TED Talk. And so it was a great day to be there on the college campus, and I just want to thank their staff for working with me, getting me there. It's hard to get in my calendar. However, we got there, and it was a great time to interact with some of our folks in the community, our students, and I talked to 3 students who were from Indio. You know, so 3 of our constituents were there, and that was great to tell my story on how I got to this dais by way of 46299 Arabia, which is down the street into the correctional system and now. And so I believe it was inspiring to some of the young folks who were there who got to hear that story. So that will conclude my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Furman. Councilmember Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All my committees were dark, but I'll start on more of a somber note. I was represented us at the funeral of Delvina Ramirez, who is our city treasurer, who passed on, unfortunately, way too young from cancer. Said a few words. They appreciated us being there and the flowers, and just told her how much that she'd always be a part of the Indio family when she's there. So they laid her to rest today, and God rest her soul and her family, and told them if they needed anything that we're here for them. So did that. Also for Sunline Transit Agency, if you haven't heard, Lauren Skyver, our general manager and CEO, has resigned. She's moving on to the second largest transportation company in the United States as their COO. So we will start an extensive search for a new transportation manager for Sunline. I will be heading the committee as the chairman of Sunline to see who we can bring in. Whoever it is going to have to know about hydrogen cell. We're not going to go backwards, so we're going to look at how we can move somebody forward, and we expect quite a few people to be involved in trying to seek that position. So it's a committee of 5 of us, and we'll be looking at interviewing individuals. We have a headhunter out now looking at opportunities to bring towards us, and then we'll pick that out and hopefully get somebody. She'll be leaving on March 3rd, so we'll have to have an interim, and we're determining that right now also. A couple other things. I did the ribbon cutting for the Highway 111. The county supervisor, Victor Manuel Perez, had a ribbon cutting for the initial opening of the grounds right in front of the fairgrounds to kind of spruce it up. They're ready for the fair, as everybody said. It's back after a couple of years. They expected after a couple of years off that it's going to be really heavily attended with Pickering. And then on Monday, the 20th, as always, we'll have the parade. So look forward to seeing everyone there. And then lastly, I want to say a shout out to Pastor Melissa and Tony Williams from Love of Christ Community Church. They've been here many a times giving us the invocation. They had their 10th year anniversary, and I was able to celebrate with them. And it seems like just the other day, and one of the highlights that they recognized was that they bought their building and they paid it off in 5 years. So they're debt free, and that's obviously a noteworthy thing for their congregation to invest back in themselves. So congratulations to them, and like I said, a somber goodbye to Ms. Ramirez. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Miller. Last week I had a meeting with CVAG's Energy and Environment Committee. We had CVWD report on their regional conservation programs. They have increased their turf removal rebate to $3 per square feet, with some cities adding on extra rebates on top of that. Their goal is to remove over 4 million square feet of turf by the end of the year. They also mentioned that some cities do require 25% canopy coverage to make sure that we're not creating heat islands as we remove that turf. CVAG will also be looking at urban greening initiatives for the region to help residents deal with the increasing heat here in the desert. They said we've been tracking longer summers now, and some areas are seeing weather over 90 degrees for over half of the year. So they'll be looking at drafting new programs and applying to new grants that could help our cities plant more shade trees and mitigate these issues of increased temperatures. I also requested a future discussion items on renewable energy and updates on water negotiations at the state level. For renewable energy, we want to look at where we are with electrical infrastructure. Last time IID presented to us, they mentioned that we're about $500 million behind in electrical infrastructure in IID territory. So we want to look at the incentives that are coming from the state and federal government and see how these funds could help us make our grid more complete and make our grid more complete and more reliable with the help of these new funding sources. For water, we know IID and our state officials are in current negotiations with other states and other parties in the Southwest region to see where there will be cuts from Colorado River water use. So we're looking to make sure that we're up to date on these conversations as a region and preparing for any potential cuts to the Colorado River water supply, which we count on to refill our aquifer. I also attended a virtual meeting held by the county, which was the 211 State of Need, and they helped explain some of the data on 211 calls. So for those of you who are not familiar, it's a county phone line that helps connect residents to services, whether it's financial services, housing services, healthcare services. And what we saw in that data is by far most of the calls that they're getting is for housing services, whether that's emergency shelters, housing payment assistance, or legal help during eviction processes. That's the most calls that they're getting with that phone line. So this lets us know that there is a lot of people losing their homes in our region and a lot of displacement happening as our region's housing costs are rising. I also attended a conference for our local HOAs where a few of our staff members helped explain the boundaries between who enforces what when there's an HOA in our neighborhoods and how we can work best with our local HOAs. I also saw a great turnout for our local artists here at the Local Artist Festival in downtown. Our Indio Rotary, CV Arts Center, and our Youth Advisory Council did a great job there, bringing out our local artists to help promote their businesses and bringing out the community, and really ran into some really cool artists there and enjoyed some good weather with everyone and was able to purchase a few cool gifts for Valentine's Day there. And lastly, I attended the local farmers market, and we got some great produce there, some snacks for the Super Bowl. They have some amazing produce and great food there. If you haven't checked it out, come by. It's every Sunday from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we have, as was mentioned before, our county fair coming up. We have the parade on Monday at 9 a.m. in downtown, and we'll also have the fair starting up at the fairgrounds from the 17th all the way to the 26th. And that's all I have. So we'll move on to our next item, which is excusing our Youth Advisory Council. Ready to go?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks for joining us. Appreciate the input. We'll see you next time. Bye. See ya. Bye. And we'll move on to our consent calendar. We have a pretty long one this time with some great items there from our staff. Thank you, staff, for your hard work on these items and getting these passed through. A lot of funding going on here, so really appreciate it. Any items that you would like to pull? Yes.
Yes. A couple of things. First of all, I just need to mention on item 10.6, with respect to the commercial lease agreement with Everbloom Coffee, I met with our city attorney just to let everyone know that there is no conflict of interest with respect to my being able to vote. It's outside that 500-foot sphere, so I'm good there. And then the other two things is I really wanted to pull item 10.7 and 10.11, please.
All right. Item 10.7, we have
That's a deferral
adopting
program.
a development impact fee deferral program. And we have Carl Morgan. Carl Morgan.
Honorable Mayor, members of City Council, Carl Morgan, your Economic Development Director. I think the staff report kind of speaks for itself. Essentially what we're doing is we're recommending to the City Council from a staff standpoint what we're hearing in the multifamily markets and in the retail markets is that there's a lot of pressure from construction costs going up and tenants renegotiating lease agreements. So To keep our momentum going, we're proposing a kind of a progressive approach to come forward to the council to do a fee deferral 3 years from the issuance of the certificate of occupancy. It's not an incentive program, it's not a waiver, it's a fee deferral. We believe that that's going to keep the momentum going up in our North Indio area, where we have a number of tenants that are looking to come in. Also on Highway 111, in terms of spurring new multifamily development and new commercial development in that area, consistent with the recently adopted Highway 111 specific plan. We're recommending that this until such time as the council might choose to suspend the program, but at least for probably the foreseeable next year or two, this is something that we believe is needed. It's a progressive approach. City manager supports it. Staff is supporting this. Appreciate you bringing it out so we could talk a little bit about it. But it is something that we believe is definitely necessary. We're hearing that these tenants are retrading transactions, meaning they're coming back to the developer, negotiating less rent. That puts pressure on the construction costs for the building, which keep going up. And then that's also made worse by increasing interest rates. So we think that this is going to give us a little leg up with respect to keeping these tenants coming, this commercial development coming in our city, and also another tool in our toolbox to support multifamily development and revitalization of not only downtown but also Highway 111.
Great. Thank you very much. I wanted this to be up front and center. I think it's a great program. Really wanted to thank staff for being innovative and business friendly. I mean, this is really the ultimate in being business friendly. So thank you very much for that effort, for coming up with that, and for presenting it to council.
Yeah, Carl, so you're going to defer them for 3 years. What happens if they go belly up before then? How do we collect our fees, or what do we do to protect ourselves?
I believe that we have in the fee deferral program the ability that requires them to pay back.
Yeah, at least in this scenario where the building is then built, we have the opportunity for a new tenant to come in. Now, we certainly hope the success of the initial tenant, but eventually there will be an impact for the purposes of the impact fees, and so it'd just be another deferral until we get the next one. But the problem right now, as indicated, is it's just so costly to get the buildings built. So at least we're one step further. Even if one of them doesn't make it, we'll have someone else come in.
I just want to make sure that if the fees are deferred, whoever then takes the building over must pay the deferral fees back to us to make sure that we're getting our funding. If not, then it gives somebody an opportunity not to pay the fees. 2 or 3 years later, they can make another deal with somebody else, and then we're out the fees and that. And it's not fair to the other businesses. So there's got to be some mechanism in place to make sure that whoever takes that building over like that would have to pay those fees too.
Great point. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Morgan? Good, thank you. And then for 10.11, we have our art projects. We have Ms. Leila Namvar.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Leila Namvar, public arts analyst. I need to remember that's a new title. So I'm here if you have any questions to answer. I have a presentation. Oh, it's up there. So however you would like to go for this item.
Do you have a question, presentation?
I'd like to go through the presentation. And then.
Sure. So we are before you for 3 contracts. All these projects were presented to the council as part of the public arts work plan, and the budget was also there as well. So this is the one of the projects, which is Second Entry Gateway project. The artist is Peter Hazel. He's proposing a desert tortoise. It is next to the to the school on Jackson and Kenner, as you see on the map on the right side. So the commission, the Public Arts Commission, chose this sculpture, which will be covered by tiles that the artist hand makes them, and they're very durable and they don't even break. He actually showed us tests during the meeting. So the commission thought this would be a great opportunity for the kids to see a tortoise by the school. The contract is $125,000 to fabricate, deliver, and install the piece. And the piece will be installed within that grass area north of Kenner and west of Jackson, south of Armory. We also will make sure that it's not going to interfere with the installation, won't interfere, or the location won't interfere with the Jackson widening project. This one is Indio mural number 13, or Jackson Bridge mural, that it came again before you for a budget increase for $75,000. There are two artists that will work on this mural, and as you see, they're actually also painting the stairs, the walls, and the columns, and they're using some images that it goes with the history of our city. Next one is Fred Waring Bridge. As you see there, it's a bridge that it has a low wall and railing. It is next to basically one of the entrances or exits to the CV link, so we thought a transportation concept would be suitable. So this is for $30,000, and as you see, it has transportation. It also has animals that they are within the desert. So north side will be more of the colder or cool colors for the sunset, and this, I guess the south side will be more of the warm for the sunrise. So these are three projects before you, and the recommendation is, I'm not going to read it as long, so basically to award those contracts and allow the city manager and city attorney to work on the contracts. I'll be happy to answer if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Namvar. Any questions?
I don't have any questions of you, Ms. Namvar. Thank you. Great job. I really sort of had some questions for my fellow council members. Thank you. These are all really cool, although probably the third one might not be my favorite. But I wondered if we should, instead of burying these in the consent calendar, if we need to play a more active role in the decision-making process as we go through. Not trying to usurp the Arts Commission or any of the commissions for that matter, but I would feel for the amount of money that we're spending here that we need to wrap our arms around these things a little bit more closely. And I just wanted to see what everyone else on the council thought, potential direction to give to staff.
Yeah, I may chime in on that. So I would, am I on?
Yes.
I'd be more accustomed to the Arts Commission being this advisory recommendation body where they would be reviewing all of the proposals. They might even score them, recommend the top one or two, and then the city council would also see that work. You would see the body of the work from the commissions. You'd see the proposals, the RFP initially, you'd see all the proposals, you'd see the rationale as to why they scored one higher than the other, and then you would make the final decision. I just fear that if you just see one option, you don't know all of the others that existed. Oftentimes we do remind the Arts Commission they're not approving anything, they're recommending it to you. So I would echo the comments. It's been something that's been awkward to me as I've been a new member of the team to see it kind of just happen. In fact, this initially was presented to me to just sign. And I thought, well, I think if I were a council member, I'd want to see these. And so that's why we presented them as they are. But there may be more detail that you could see in the future, and as indicated, perhaps not on consent. 98% of the time, you likely go with what the Arts Commission recommended, but sometimes you may not.
I could. Yeah, I understand the art, and I think they did a great job. I just don't know about the bridge.
Thank you.
My concern with that is that I like the murals in the downtown and places it blends in. That's so bright, so out of place, sitting on a bridge as you come through. Are we going to do it to all of them? I mean, it just doesn't resonate with me because you look behind it, and I love the mural itself. I just don't like the location because are we going to do that to every entry bridge with the houses and everything by it where it doesn't?
Is this Fred Warren? Maybe if we can go back a couple slides.
Yeah, I just think that murals, art pieces
That
can
one
go
right
anywhere if they're brought in, but a mural, I mean, with that bright red and blue and that, I understand why it stands out, but on that bridge, I mean, look at the houses behind it and everything else that's on there. I just don't think it blends into the community to make it look like it should. A mural should be an enhancement to the area. This, to me, looks like we painted a bridge, and it just doesn't match the rest of the area, just like you wouldn't want to put something off the wall in somebody else's area that doesn't match. I think on something like this where you're going to change something that drastic on something that's never been done before, I think you need to go to the community and ask them if they would like this instead of getting the backlash later. Because once we paint it, it isn't coming back. And we have many other places we could do. We haven't even finished the bridges where we paid everybody to put the steel beams on there.
Oh.
That has been finished.
Yes,
Is it?
Miles.
We never know.
Yeah, Miles Avenue, yes.
Nobody knows. Good.
Bridge, yeah.
But I'm saying, I just don't think it fits into the place. I like the murals. I just don't think that's the right place for it.
And I agree, and I think that's why I wanted to bring this up, because I like I said, I don't want to usurp the Arts Commission, but I would like to have our arms around a broader piece of this process for just that reason. That seemed very stark to me, sort of jumped out and bit me. And if it did for me, it would do for others.
Would we do it on Highway 111 right in our entry to La Quinta?
Yikes.
Why do it here, is what I'm saying. If you wouldn't do it there, why would you do it here?
Particularly on Fred Waring, perhaps, which has some formality to it.
Just doesn't blend in.
Yeah.
You're going to have a mural out in the middle of nowhere. Art piece? Absolutely. Mural, no.
So
that's my personal opinion.
May I make a suggestion? How if I work with the artist to bring the sharpness of the colors a little bit lower, and then we come back before the council for that?
Or I'm jumping in rudely, but were there other proposals submitted on the bridge?
There were other proposals, 2 more, which both of them were movement of birds and animals. For some reason, the 2 artists came with not knowing each other with the same concept. But I'm open to bring. I mean, I'm just a staff, so whatever.
Were those colors a little more muted, maybe? The birds and the.
No, most of them were. Using the sunrise and sunset concept.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm not an artist, so I do appreciate the artwork, and I appreciate the work that's gone behind it. But I do think that some of these things should come to the council first, so we can analyze it. And in particular, we go back to the first one, which is the tortoise. I love the concept of the tortoise. But I'm also afraid that it's really close to the school. And I don't know if that was discussed with the students going up and down that area, and also with some of our artwork and pieces. We have the desert tortoise there, but what's the history behind it? Could we get plaques or something that could educate folks if they're there visiting them? So I think those things could be ironed out if they come to the council. I appreciate the work that the Art Commission has done. I appreciate some of this, and I'll be the first one to tell you a lot of these things I have to sleep on. I mean, I love our new Indio signs, but I'll be honest with you, when it was first presented to me, right? What did I say? I had to sleep on it, and I woke up the next day and loved it. So some of these concepts are new to us, and the Fred Waring Bridge, maybe if we discussed it before, we could have came up with a different concept. Love the artwork, but it may not be a fit for that area, but it might be a fit for somewhere else. The other bridge, the Jackson Bridge, very bright colors, very bright, not particularly my taste, but I do like to defer to artists and the new generation and see what they like. I'm open to those things, but a lot of what we're talking about could be ironed out if this was brought to us. So I would like to ask the mayor if we could continue this item and bring it back as an agenda item, and we can have some discussion on it. And thank you for your work. We appreciate it. Beautiful.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I see the concern with it coming to council, and I think I don't know. I honestly trust my public arts commissioner to make the best decisions. I'm not nearly as close to being as good as her at analyzing art and these opportunities. So, and I also don't think us up here, we're not in the art world, right? I don't think we have that kind of professional input into these. I'm okay with, if it's coming back for us to look at the end to finalize it, but for us to be making these big changes when we have public arts commissioners who are in the art world that are deciding these, it's kind of counterproductive to me in a way. But I do understand, even these projects, I think they're great, and I think it's great that it pops out in that area because nothing else, kind of like our signs, right? They pop out. They're very colorful, and we are looking at some more colorful improvements throughout our city. But
they're strategically placed.
Yes.
That's the difference. I just think if we're going to put something like that on there, that the residents should have a say instead of us putting a piece of that up between their houses where we've never done it before. And will we do it on other places? Will we do it next to the bridge on other spots? Or do you say this is good for them but not good for somebody else? That's really bright to be putting up to somebody's house in a bare area.
But it's not like in their neighborhood. It's on the bridge.
But they got to drive by it every day.
I don't know. I don't see.
So to add one point, I'm okay to bring all these projects back to the council. So I like that. The more work, the happier I am. So it keeps me young. But this was, as I explained in previously, it came before you as a project, as a public arts, City of Indio Public Arts work plan, and it was spelled out. Frederick Bridge, it's gonna be transportation because it's next to the CV link. This is the budget. So the council basically saw that, however, it wasn't that detailed. But I like the idea, so whatever the council would like and my big boss tells me, I'll do that.
Well, I just think we bring it back, and I understand what the mayor's saying. We appoint these folks for their expertise. However, they're making recommendations to the council to spend these dollars, and I think our input on some of these items. Even the tortoise. I want to enhance some of the artwork. I want the story to be told. Like, okay, it's a tortoise. Well, what's the history behind it? Could we add some plaques or something to that? Yeah.
All our RFPs includes plaquing the artwork, so it will be part of it.
Okay. So I think consensus is we'll bring this one back.
Yes,
with some adjustments to the third project. Or options.
Yeah, and I think there are other options you just haven't seen. So I think as a practice, if there's no objection, the commission makes this firm recommendation that you may almost always go with, as you're stating, Mayor. But then you would see the work product, you'd see the other artists, and you could say, well, maybe from time to time, maybe not real often, you may say, can we send that one back and look at it again, or maybe that other artist can tweak things a little bit. I think that's better public policy than letting the non-electeds make such critical decisions that impact properties and so forth.
Okay. So then, will you is there going to have to be some kind of change, a resolution or anything?
No.
No? Okay.
This tonight would have been presented, maybe not on consent, as an administrative item. You would have seen the whole work product, the other submittals. And a point is made when we bring the work plan forward to you, that is probably your best time to say, ooh, is that what we really want? But in defense of you, the work plan didn't show this. Yeah. It just said, hey, some sort of transportation theme, we ought to put something on that. This will prevent the tagging that takes place. This will draw attention to the community as moving forward. It's just whether or not this is the exact design that the five of you want. So we'll bring it back with a little more detail.
Thank you.
And also the community input. I think that's
well,
big.
Great idea with social media now. Something like this could say, this is going to be proposed. What do you think? Now we may get some artist friends chime in, and that may not, it's a self-selected survey, so you wouldn't want to take the math and say that 20% said this, but it would at least give you some idea, and the community would be informed, and we could use social media with these type of things, and maybe they give you a raw score that also helps you in your vote.
And I wonder, how do we get community input during the Public Arts Commission meetings, right? How much are we publicizing any of those meetings?
Great point in that we could push social media. The Arts Commission this week will be discussing these. Come voice your opinion or email Ms. Namvar to what your opinions are. We can do better with both the City Council meetings and the Arts Commission in that regard. Okay, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other items? We're good?
I'm good.
Okay. So then, you know, again, just wanted to say thank you to our team. You know, bringing Everbloom to downtown, I think it's something that a lot of people are looking forward to. The dispatch center improvements, I know our public safety officials really need that at the moment. $2 million in road improvements, so thank you to Tim and his team for all their work on that. The art improvements coming into town that our community is always asking for, and, you know, new building equipment that we're also purchasing here. So a lot of great advancements here from our staff, so thank you again. And I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to pass the consent calendar, excluding item 10.11 and continuing that to a further meeting.
Thank you.
And I'll second that, but City Manager, how do we make sure that if everybody's in agreement on the first item on the fees deferral, that we make sure that there's some way to protect the city from, even if it's leaning the building?
Yeah, the city attorney whispered to me that leaning the property would be the best approach, and Mr. Morgan indicated we actually have a provision to do so. So
Okay,
that's a great point, and it's included.
Thank you. I second that motion then.
All right, we have a motion from Councilmember Furman and a second from Councilmember Miller. Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Furman.
Aye.
Councilmember Holmes.
Aye.
Councilmember Miller.
Aye.
And Mayor Ortiz.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. And we'll go on to our administrative items. We have 11.1, City of Indio Fiscal Year 2022-2023 Mid-Year Budget Report by Mr. Rob Rockwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am Rob Rockwell, the Assistant City Manager and the Finance Director for the City of Indio. Tonight I'll be presenting to you the fiscal year 22-23 mid-year budget report. I'll actually be walking you through the document itself, which is an attachment to the staff report. At the end of the presentation, staff will be asking you to receive and file and approve the budget adjustments that are contained in the report. Those budget adjustments increase revenue and also increase spending authority for various departments within the general fund. In summary, I want to say that the finances are good. There's really no bad news in this report. Last year, there was a number of revenue trends that hit all-time highs, and it looks like for the most part those trends are holding this year. However, once we get into the multi-year projection, you'll see that there are some uncertainties in the future, some potential political and economic forces that might put pressure on the general fund. So there is a word of caution looking out in the out year. So with that, we'll get into the detail a little bit more. That doesn't look like my mouse is working. Is there a way to scroll? There's no zoom. All right. Yeah, and there's missing pages. Okay, here we go. So this is going to be a little more challenging than I thought. But, so I'm going to walk you through the report and stop at a number of tables and give you the highlights, and I'll be happy to answer any questions along the way. So this particular table shows you general fund revenue. And on the left, it's the categories of general fund revenue with taxes represented in a little bit more detail because taxes represent 75% of the general purpose revenues that the City of Indio receives. And if you look at the first column, that's actually fiscal year 21-22, and that shows you what the revenue sources generated last fiscal year for the City of Indio. So, and that, of course, is in millions of dollars. So if you look at the first line sales taxes, you'll see last year the city received $16.9 million in sales taxes and $17.3 million in transaction taxes. That's the Measure X sales tax. And if you go all the way down looking at the other revenue sources, you can see last year that city received, I'm not making those changes, no. You'll see that the total revenue for the general fund last year was $107.9 million. Now, with that information, you can go and you look at the 2022-23 adopted budget column. And you can see this is what the budget looked like when you adopted it at the beginning of the fiscal year, where the assumption was $15.9 million in sales tax money. And if you follow that column down, you'll see the budget was assumed a total of $98.6 million in general fund revenue. What you have next to that is the column where we're recommending changes to the revenue assumptions. Staff was recommending an increase in sales tax revenue of $1 million, a little over $1 million. An increase to the transactions, this is the Measure X sales tax of 1.3, recommending an increase in transient occupancy tax revenue of 3.45. We asking you to recognize a little increase in the music service budget, music festival service budget of $500,000, and then there's a modest decrease in development-related revenue within the other service charges. Not that it's bad news, it's just that we're not seeing the robust trends that we saw in the past. So in total, we're asking to recognize a $5.9 million increase in general fund revenue, so that the total will be $104.57 for the fiscal year. And then when you look at the report, it gets into a little bit more detail, and I'll walk you through a couple of those charts for the major revenue sources. So here you have sales and use tax. And what the chart shows you in the dark black line is what the actual receipts were for fiscal years 18 through fiscal year 22. And what you can see there is 18 and 19, an increase in sales tax. You kind of see a decline of what I would call the COVID impact on sales tax in fiscal year 20. And then you see a robust recovery in 2021, up to $16.9 million in 22. And then what you see after that are the projections that we're building into the multi-year projection for the next 5 years, $17 million up to $18 million in sales tax revenue. Also on the right side of this, you'll see a brief bar chart, and those bar charts show you what receipts were through the first 6 months of last year compared to what the trend is for this year. So that is an example of what the sales tax trends are.
Sorry, Rob, quick question. Why do we expect that flattening of that curve?
Well, it has a lot to do with the economy. You know, there's inflationary pressures, there's political pressures, and we really believe that coming out of COVID, there was a lot of pent-up buying need, and we think there's a lot of people that are spending money because inflation rates are rising and they want to do some borrowing now with lower interest rates. So the expectation is that trend, the revenue trend is going to level off, and there's not going to be as much spending as there has been in the past. Now, we're overdue for an economic recession. We usually have recessions every 7 years. That changed because the severity of the Great Recession kind of changed the frequency. But the economists expect some type of turn down, maybe a slowdown at the end of this calendar year, maybe next year. So we think that this chart reflects a better reflection of what actual revenue trends might be. Could they be different? Yeah, they could be far worse if there was a recession, or they could turn out to be better. But we believe at this point in time, this is our best estimate of what the revenue trend is going to be going in the next 4 years, which is actually good that we don't see any severe turn downs in the economy. That's really going to affect our revenue. But we do believe there will be some new revenue sources that generate sales tax, and also some recessionary pressure that will also lower spending from the consumers.
Thank you.
Okay, maybe you can help me a little bit on this chart. I asked the city manager if I could use my presentation instead of a PowerPoint. It's the last time he's going to say yes, I can tell you that. Okay, so this is Measure X, and when you look at Measure X trends, what you're seeing here is a very similar type of effect. You see 10, 11, and 11, a little bit of reduction in fiscal year 20. You see a big spike between 20 and 22 as we're coming out of COVID, and then you're seeing a similar trajectory to sales tax revenue. The unique thing about transactions use tax is that it's taxed on goods that are used in the city of Indio, not just bought in the city of Indio. So if you have a lot of development in the city and they're buying equipment that they're putting in the city of Indio, that will spike transactions and use tax. So it looks like it mirrors sales tax, but it doesn't always mirror it exactly. Historically, it's been less than sales tax, Bradley Burns sales tax, slightly less, maybe 90%. Last year, it actually exceeded sales tax for the first time. So going forward, we think it'll mirror sales tax almost exactly, but there's no exact guarantee that will be the case. But still, the good news here, we expect the sales tax to hold and slightly increase in the next coming 4 or 5 years.
Rob, can you give us like examples of how that differs for the two taxes?
Sure. So if you are a City of Indio resident and if you buy a car in Cathedral City, you will pay the regular Bradley Burns 1% sales tax because that's where you're buying it. Sales tax is a point of sale type of tax. The transactions and use tax is based on the fact that because you live in the City of Indio, assuming you'll be using your car mostly from the City of Indio, you pay the transactions and use tax, and that's the Measure X piece. So that literally if you live in the City of Indio and if you buy artwork outside of the city, very high value artwork, but you're displaying it and using the City of Indio, then you would also pay the transactions and use tax. So the thing I wanted to mention about Measure X is you can see that we're expecting $17 to $18 million in the next couple of years. You know that from that total, we are expecting to use about $1.2 million for judgment obligation bonds. This funding source will be dedicated to paying off the new public safety campus bonds, which will be on average about $8 million a year. And if we continue to dedicate $4.5 million to roads, that's going to leave about $3 million of Measure X money available for other purposes. Just looking quickly at transient occupancy taxes. Again, you see what looks like a positive trend in 18 and 18-19, a COVID impact that affected transient occupancy tax more than it did sales tax. You'll see a robust recovery, and in fact, it's hard to believe, but transient occupancy tax is growing faster than sales tax in the City of Indio. And I'm sure a lot of it has to do with the short-term vacation rental activity that's happening in the City of Indio. We have 1,400 licensed short-term rentals now, and almost 60% of our total TOT in the city is being generated from short-term vacation rentals. The next chart is property tax. And this really represents more of the common theme that's happening in the City of Indio. You see a continued increase in property values, very consistent over the last 5 years. We expect that trend to continue. This graph is actually property tax in lieu of vehicle license fees. This is a tax that the state took away vehicle license fees from the city several years ago, and in lieu they give us a portion of property tax that's based on changes in population and assessed value of property values. So this is another good underlying chart that shows consistent increases in population and assessed values, property values in the City of Indio that continues to grow. This chart is utility users tax. This is pretty consistent. We see a little bit of a bump last year. We expect there to be some leveling off. This revenue doesn't change very much. This utility user tax is taxes that residents pay on gas, water, electricity, telecommunications, and video. And of course, if residents are over 62 and head of household, they are exempt from this tax. If they are exempt if they request to be. So there's more details in the report that go into the other revenue sources. But I want to move on to a chart reflecting the appropriations for contingency. So as a matter of housekeeping, the city appropriates all new revenue in the appropriations for contingency account. And the table here is a great illustration for you because it shows all the incoming revenue and it shows all of the expected uses. So here, if you look at the chart, you can see at the beginning of the year, you appropriated $500,000 in the appropriations for contingency account. And again, those appropriations are in the budget and at the city manager's discretion to reappropriate for another city priority. And that is in fact what's happened here. So you can see the city manager moved money out of contingency for special legal counsel services of almost $75,000. Public Works was provided $67,000 for TTC grant implementation costs. And then on 9/21, this is a council action that appropriated $147,000 for cannabis licensing activities, services provided by HDL, which brought the contingency balance down to $209,000. So in this case, we're asking council to recognize the $5.4 million in the contingency account. Again, it's more of an administrative activity. which would bring the account balance up to 5.6. And then after that, you're seeing the staff's recommended withdrawals from contingency to increase spending in various departments for the city of Indio, which include, this is the city manager's recommendation, a $40,000 increase for community services, which is detailed on page 13, related to Second Saturday events, $40,000 for economic development to cover additional appraisals and data analysis, a $292,000 increase for the community development department, which covers the various implementation of the strategic plan and the general plan. Again, more details on page 15. And then the elephant in the room is a $4 million increase for public works to do additional road and street maintenance. Okay, so upon your approval, that will leave $1.2 million in the contingency account. The city manager is asking that we recognize two potential obligations against that total, a $600,000 potential payment to in regard to a litigation that is coming to fruition here shortly, and $400,000 to assist business to construct code compliance trash enclosures, something that will come in the future. So if those come to fruition, that'll leave $245,000 in the contingency account for the city manager to allocate if necessary for the second half of the fiscal year. This is the general fund multi-year projection, and this is where staff and the city manager spends an exceptional amount of time trying to build a model that really reflects what's the future holds for the city of Indio. And so it's a bit complicated, so I'm going to walk through this a little slow. But if you'll just look at the original budget and the adopted budget columns right now, the first line is the revenue lines. Again, this is consistent with what was talked about earlier. $98 million in the original budget being increased to $104.5 million in revenue. If you go down from there, you'll see of that amount, $35.8 million is being dedicated to salary and benefits. That number is not changing. General appropriations of $28.56, which is not changing. There's, of that total of $17.9 million is dedicated to the fire and ambulance services. That's not changing. One-time project cost would be going to from 52 to $58 million. That's significantly the staff's recommended $4 million increase in road maintenance. The other piece of that is a $1.3 million that increase that you approved previously related to radio replacements for the public safety department. Looking at the next line, no change in vehicle and equipment, no changes to park maintenance, and then the sports park maintenance and the Measure X set aside, which I'll talk about in more detail in a few minutes. There's nothing in this year's budget for that. So in total, you have $137.7 million in appropriations, increasing to $144.75 upon your approval. And then the last line, you'll see that there's a fund balance increase and decrease, and that's just representing the one-time money that you built into the budget for this year that is not assumed to continue in future years. So you might ask, okay, $30 to $40 million is a lot of money. You know, how much of the pot is left? Is there going to be any more money in the future for other projects? And I'm going to answer that question on the next slide. But before we get there, looking at the multi-year, you can see that the revenue assumptions that we talked about are built into this projection of revenue increases. Salary and benefits, which includes CalPERS retirement costs, which go up every year, so slight increases are built into the out years. We have increases in fire and ambulance costs. We just had a meeting with CAL FIRE, the city manager and I, a month ago. There's a number of labor changes that have been negotiated between the state and CAL FIRE that are trickling down to the local level, and with some retro payments and COLAs, and they want to change the work weeks of how firefighters are paid. So there are some fairly significant increases in the fire costs that are going to be trickling our way. Probably the biggest impact is going to be next year, and then somewhat less the years after, but still probably in the range of $1 million a year. You'll see in the out year projections, there's no built-in assumption of one-time projects. General fund contingency, we're hoping to roll it out at $500,000 every year for the city manager. We're assuming some slight increases in vehicle and equipment costs. Those are basically replacement of dilapidated equipments and to provide also new police vehicles. We are increasing park maintenance modestly so that we can keep up the appearance and the usefulness of the parks. The next line is a sport park maintenance. We know we're building a very elaborate sports park off Jackson. We don't know exactly what the maintenance costs are going to be, but we know where they're going to hit in fiscal year 25-26. So we're throwing in an estimated $300,000 until we have a better figure of what the maintenance costs are going to be. Next line, Measure X set aside. Now this is a little bit of a doozy, but it's important for you to understand. What we've done here is we've taken all of the unobligated Measure X dollars, unobligated. After we pay the bonds, after we pay the road service, this is the available balance. And we've earmarked it in the report. So even though it shows you as a set aside, it's still going to be available for you to decide how to spend. But what's important for us, for staff, is to recognize the council's desire to have the remaining balance separated from the rest of the general fund. So that's what this recognizes. And the reason you see it so high in 23-24 is because the $7 million we have to pay in 24-25 is the first year that we really have a bond payment on the public safety campus in the new city hall. So we get 1 year of reprieve, and then it's going to kick in 24-25, and that's why you see the Measure X set aside going from $11 to $4 million. So if you follow the chart, the table, you're going to have about $11 million in Measure X money and about $1 million in surplus. And again, this is based on projections to put into next year's budget in a one-time fashion. But if you follow this, you can see there's some negative numbers in 25-26 and 26-27, which again is illustrating that potentially if revenue trends don't come in better than projected, then we're going to have to talk about potentially either using Measure X money to cover some of the budgetary shortfall or reducing expenditures. So definitely 2 good years. Beyond that, a little uncertainty. So we just have to be careful about what we commit to in the long term as far as long-term expenditure commitments. Okay, last table that I just want to go over, and is the general fund balance table. So this is how we break down basically the available money that's available in the general fund to spend. And you really want to focus your attention on the committed, the assigned, and the unassigned categories. And if you look at the fiscal year ending 21-22, in the committed category, you'll see it says $15 million, and that represents the reserve for economic uncertainty, the money that's set aside in the reserve. And then if you look over into the current fiscal year, you see that you've already authorized an increase to $17 million in that reserve, and that number is not expected to change next year. That's about, the policy says that you want to set aside 15% of general fund revenue, so that's basically right on the mark, right on the policy mark. Assigned fund balance, this is money that staff and the city manager recognizes as needed for a council priority. So in 21-22, $44 million was assigned because staff already knew that the council was going to commit that amount of money into the future year budget. So it's technically assigned because it's not free money or unobligated resources. And unassigned better represents the unobligated resources. So that $15 million that we see as available fund balance at the fiscal year ending 22-23, which is this fiscal year, we expect will also be available for the council to commit to one-time projects next year. And it's the city manager's hope that he'll have that conversation with you in May as we go into next year's budget on how you want that money allocated. So that actually completes my report. I did want to, one final note of housekeeping I wanted to mention. That the next item on the agenda is also the mid-year budget report for the Water Authority. It's a receive and file, and they don't have actually recommend any budget adjustments, so they don't have any planned presentation. So the council just wants to receive and file that report after taking action on this one. That would be staff's recommendation. So with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions about the mid-year.
Any questions from our council? Nothing?
So Bryan, if I could, Bryan, so on the $4 million, and I love Tim to death, I've known him for many years. Are these shovel ready to go? where we already have the bids and more opportunities to be able to do it? Or
We
he's
don't have,
standing up.
oh, well, go ahead.
Yeah.
We don't have the bids, but we certainly have the need. If we went through all of our, inventory of streets and roadway segments, which we do have a rating for each of those, we need another 10, 15 million. So this is another investment. Mr. Rockwell indicated that there's another opportunity in May to probably look at another $15 million investment. Roads will be our best investment with regard to saving money now rather than spending more later. So that's why we recommend it. But Tim might have more specifics to the exact $4 million.
I sure do. Good evening. So $4 million, on your consent calendar today, you approved the $2 million change order to ATP. So we're already moving forward with that. So this $4 million will fund a good chunk of that $2 million. We have some money left over from the previous contract. So 1.6 of the $4 million will go towards the $2 million change order that you already approved. The 2.4 additional will go towards slurry sealing all throughout the community. And we already have the authorization from council to proceed forward. We already know what streets we're going to be slurrying. So we're ready to roll. As soon as we get your blessing here, we're going out to town.
Okay. So that was my first part, because that's the extra money. I don't like to see, when I first got on council, we cut everybody 10%. We laid people off. The people that actually got us into the jam, we ended up giving the golden handshake and them going away. And it was very difficult to watch all our staff go down. And we're starting to get towards an unbalanced budget. And we promised the people that when they gave us Measure E, at least I did, that we would use it for one-time opportunities, not to balance our budget. So we've got to figure out a way to be able to either put money aside for reserves so we don't go through that again with our staff, and we protect our staff in our city, and at the same time build our reserves. If we're going to stay at 15%, we need to keep up with that. If our budget's going to raise, then we got to raise our reserves to match what we're supposedly come forward, and we need to pay down our PERS and medical obligations. I mean, in the long run, that'll protect us more, because like things like CAL FIRE, we have no control over. But things that we can control, we need to put money aside so that 10, 15 years from now, the councils that come after us say, these guys made a sharp decision on making sure they protected the city in the long run. So I caution to spend it because we have it. But you are right. We will save money on the roads. We have been neglected.
Yeah, and just to echo, in fact, complimenting the council, looking on that very last graph, what's up there on the screens, the committed by council. So just 2 years ago, it was at $12 million, and now it's 17. And as Councilmember Miller indicated, as the general fund grows, it will be beyond 17. And that's addition to all the other assigned and committed resources that for cash flow purposes, we have available if need be. Now, this committed rainy day fund, for lack of a better word, that's now at 17 million, is not good to use for recurring expenses. It can tide us over for a year or two, but it's supposed to be there forever, in theory. So, yes, and back to Measure X, as Mr. Rockwell indicated as well, we are disciplining it just like you've directed us to do, that Measure X is there available. While it could be used for operations, it would be very dangerous to do so, because once you do it, then it's gone.
You never stop.
It never stops, because if you've created a recurring expense, those who have that one-time opportunity for projects, streets, parks, facilities, are gone once you commit them to a recurring increase. So we're disciplining ourselves on that. So it's back a couple of slides, and we'll present more of this obviously in May when we come up with the new fiscal year budget. There are some concerns in the outlying years, mostly because of public safety costs. We will be connecting with fire, our CAL FIRE friends in the county, to see if there aren't some menu of services that perhaps we can mitigate these significant impacts. This next year is 1.8 million, probably about $1 million a year thereafter. That is not sustainable in the long term. So that's something to consider. Just a change there, a slight change there, we're no longer in deficit. So that's how close we are.
And I think we got to do that. We're fortunate to have our own ambulances still. One of the few cities that has their own ambulance service that does also protects our residents and our firefighters, because the actual paramedics are actually firefighters also. Allows us to go into a building if it need to be. But I just caution for the wind there, because I know we're excited about what we're doing, But it wasn't that far ago that we were cutting staff and laying people off and cutting our budget from $60 million down to the $40 million range. And that's tough. Our obligations to our residents and our staff to make sure we protect them. So.
We promise. We've got both hands on the steering wheel.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Miller.
Thank you.
Great point. Any other questions?
No, thank you, Councilmember Miller. Thank you for your vehemence, and I sat on the outside here back in the 2008, 2010 and watched it all happen. So I appreciate, at the time, I appreciate having you on council for just that reason.
Councilmember Furman, no questions? No questions. Thank you. Great presentation, and thank you for all keeping us all in line here.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Tim.
Yes.
Thank you, City Manager.
Yes.
Good job.
I'm more than happy to make a recommendation to receive and file and approve the recommendations associated with the budget adjustments in the fiscal year 2022-2023 mid-year budget report attached A.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion from Councilmember Miller and a second from Councilmember Furman. Can I get a roll call? Oh, do we need a roll call vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Furman,
Aye.
Councilmember Holmes,
Aye.
Councilmember Miller,
Aye.
and Mayor Ortiz.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. And then next, are we just gonna go for, do we have a motion to receive and file the Indio Water Authority fiscal year mid-year budget report?
So moved. Yeah, yeah, come on, just yes.
He is pretty excited.
He was excited not to have to present. There are no changes recommended, so it's just a report.
I'll make the motion to receive and file the Indio Water Authority fiscal year 22-23 mid-year budget report.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Councilmember Holmes and a second by Councilmember Miller. Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Sure, and this would be Commissioner Furman,
Aye.
Commissioner Holmes,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
and President Ortiz.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes. We'll move on to item number 12, public comments for items on the agenda. Do we have any public comments?
None, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, well, our next meeting is March 1st. We'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 6:37. Thank you.